What's good, folks? Family, friends, loved ones, enemies, frenemies, wizards, witches, muggles, mudbloods, people of Middle Earth, to another edition of Disguised Coverage, the only podcast that gives you an equal amount of blueberries in each muffin, and is presented by the best pizza in Buffalo, New York, and that is One Pie Pizza. Find the online menu in the episode show notes, whether here on YouTube or whichever podcasting app or platform you're listening to this show on. I'm your host, Anthony. Find me on Twitter at pro__ant. That's pro2_ANT. In tonight's episode of Disguise Coverage, we will be diving into the Buffalo Bills' initial 53-man roster. Cutdown day was today, Tuesday, August 27th. The Buffalo Bills had to be roster compliant by 4 p.m. Eastern, and they were. We've got releases to talk about. We've got some surprising cuts. We've got some surprising keeps to discuss. We've got some potential moves on the horizon in terms of going forward and what to expect in the coming days based on who made the roster and what things kind of look like. And also within that conversation throughout this episode, especially for those of you who are joining me live here, but if you're not watching live and you're watching later or listening later, kind of what I want to do throughout the entirety of this episode is go position group by position group on this team and kind of give it a label in terms of like, how good is it? Like, you know, for example, we'll talk about the running backs. Is this a position group that is good enough to, you know, be on a team that wins their division, or a team that makes the wild card, or a team that wins the conference, or a team that wins the Super Bowl? I kind of want to do that to put the position groups into perspective, but also in terms of how good the roster is as a whole. I think that's a spot we're kind of coming to when it comes to the conversation about the roster. So much of the roster conversation, roster reactions are tied to individual players. And I think that makes a lot of sense, right? You know, so-and-so made it, so-and-so didn't. I'm happy, I'm upset, here's why. This guy's a free agent. Let's go after this guy to replace this guy. And a lot of it is just in a vacuum in terms of player versus player and who guys are. But I think the bigger conversation, and one that I think is pretty interesting, is, again, how good is that position group to the team, and how important is it to the team as a whole, and how does all of that come together in terms of what this roster is? I think a lot of the individual conversations dominate the bigger roster landscape conversation. And I think it's one that we don't have enough in terms of kind of really forecasting what this team is going to be this year. And then a larger conversation after that, which we're not going to have on this episode, but how that impacts things going forward down the road, 2025, 2026, so on and so forth. So I think a lot of things are going to be fun to discuss tonight in this episode. And for those of you joining me live, greatly appreciate you being here. Thank you very much. Drop a like on this video if you're willing and able and you'd be so kind. But as we go through with each topic and break each piece down, I know this is a day that's important for a lot of people. So questions, thoughts, comments, concerns, anything and everything you got, put it up into the chat. I will bring up as many things as humanly and physically possible. Super chats always get priority because I respect the monetary donation, and the color brings me away from my notes and puts me back on the screen. So anything and everything you got, put it up into the chat. I want to make this as interactive as possible, especially because I'm riding solo tonight, but also just because I know a lot of you folks have a lot of thoughts and feelings just based on how the roster is shaping up right now, and some cuts, some notable cuts, you know, a couple notable additions, some omissions, so on and so forth, that whole conversation piece. I want to start going through the chat right now. Oh, we already got a super chat. I got to stop. Oh, it's from Lauren. Lauren says, relieved to see that the tree used cut down day. Love you, Anthony. You're the best. I love you too, Lauren. I greatly appreciate you being here and watching. And thank you very much for the super chat. Lauren, you are a gem. Miss you on the Twitter space, but I respect your wishes to step away. And if I didn't have the show, I'd probably do the same thing. So appreciate you being here. Thank you very much for the kind words and the super chat and just being here. Thank you very much. I knew what you, and Lauren puts in the asterisk and says survived. I knew that you had omitted a word. I didn't know what the word was, but I knew that what you were going for was that the tree survived cut down day, or the tree made cut down day. That's exactly right. If we're going through a 1 through 53, the tree is 1. It starts with the 1. Even if we're talking Bills, I think it's the tree and then Josh Allen. I just don't see any way around it. I think what's also nice too is the tree's made a lot of like salary cap team friendly moves. He's great on the field. He's a good leader. Just everything is just fantastic. Charles says Mike White signed to the Bills practice squad. Are you telling me this, Or are you wishing this or trying to put it out into the ether? That's also a good point too, right? So it's Tuesday, August 27th. Right now it's currently 9:08 p.m. As things are breaking, if anything happens, if there's a news note, if it's something kind of coming through, you folks know how we do here. Put it up into the chat. Let me kind of know what's going on. I'd love to have as many break-in pieces that we can kind of discuss and factor in as possible. RJ says the Tree took a hometown discount. That's right. The Tree did take a hometown discount. It's kind of like a Tom Brady hometown discount, though. The Tree has a whole bunch of the Tree is its own brand, right? So the Tree has a clothing line. The Tree has a whole bunch of Christmas products that it sells. The Tree owns a couple restaurant chains. So he does a lot of different pieces. Appreciate everybody coming into the chat right now. And I like just the Tippy was saying, it already needs the Halloween decorations. It's never too early. It is a little bit right now, but once September hits, I'll do something for opening week, but then we're jumping right into fall decorations for September. Then we'll go Halloween, and then we'll do more fall, but Thanksgiving-ish for November. Oh, so Mike White is confirmed per source. I guess I'll save that for the that's good. The Tree has a rich wife that makes more money than he does. I like that. So the Tree is just free to kind of freelance and, pursue passion projects because the breadwinner is the wife. And so he's able to just kind of do whatever he needs to because he doesn't have to worry about providing for the family. I like that. I like that a lot. I like that Mike White move. It goes hand in hand with kind of the quarterback position grouping that I was going to talk about. But we will get into that as we kind of go through. Let's start with, I guess we'll start with the initial surprises. I'm going to bake some of them into the conversation as we go through. Also, everybody in the chat really lighten up that Mike White news is absolutely tremendous. Anything else you see, let's keep going through. Really good question from Mitch saying, what position group surprised you the most? I think that's going to lead into, you nailed it. I was going back and forth on should I start with quarterbacks because of the Mike White news now, or should I stay kind of the course with what I was going to do? And I'm going to take this as a sign from you, Mitch, that I should stay the course. So this first segment here, just initial surprises with the 53-man roster. And again, those of you playing at home, let me know what your surprises are in terms of who didn't make the roster, who did make the roster, and why. I feel like I can guess a couple of them already, but appreciate you, Mitch. I'm going to I'll start from a position group standpoint. A couple really all tied into one because of individual players. So corner, edge, and linebacker are the ones that surprised me the most. Really, we'll start with Daquan Hardy. I think it's the low-hanging fruit. I thought Daquan Hardy was going to make this squad. I didn't think his return elements were too poor. We talked about it during the show, and Robert already saying Hardy hurts. We talked about it in the post-game show after the Carolina game, kind of putting the roster together. We talked about it last week in the roster projection show. I thought there were a couple returns that McDermott would take umbrage with in terms of not liking the smart decision or the play or just the overall approach from Daquan Hardy at punt return. Specifically, the one that immediately comes to my mind as top is that one against Pittsburgh where he gets it, basically runs all the way back to the 1 yard line, gets away from it and gets up the sideline. But for Sean McDermott, he's not going to be a fan of that. And we know from what Sean McDermott said, he was drafted to be on this team as a punt returner. His job was to be the punt returner. So if Sean McDermott didn't feel comfortable and secure in that, that to me has to be the reason why he didn't make this roster. And, John saying Hardy may come back to the practice squad. He could. He's got a clear waiver, so there's a chance he could come back to the Bills, and maybe that's what they want. But return elements aside, I thought he played well at corner. We talked about him. I did some film pieces on him, just his feel for zone, being responsible in his zone, but reading the route distribution and making the breaks on the ball. If not for his size and frame, I think he would have had 2 or 3 interceptions just in that Pittsburgh game alone. He battled out there, had a couple good reps against the run, a couple misses against the run as well. But I just thought with what he could be as an outside corner, plus his affinity to play on the inside like he did a lot at Penn State. So you have that inside-outside versatility. You have the special teams value. I just thought that combined with how well he played would help him make the squad. Now, going against him within the corner grouping, and we're going to dive into more of it when we get to corner, but just in terms of outside corners, you've got Rasul Douglas, Christian Benford, Kyer Elam, Jamarcus Ingram, and then I guess technically Brandon Codrington, who we're going to talk about, who the Bills traded for today, who looks to be their, number one returner, but he's listed as a corner. Jamarcus Ingram gives you some inside-outside versatility. Cam Lewis is technically the backup nickel in addition to being a safety. So I guess Daquan Hardy wasn't really nickel number 2. He's probably going to be corner 5. So I understand the notion of he's really the depth for the depth. So it's not too crazy to kind of cut him and hope that he gets to the practice squad. But I thought he earned a roster spot with how well he played. I thought he and Tylen Grable were the 2 biggest surprises of the preseason in terms of how well they played. Grable kind of improved game after game and had some really nice technical moments against the Carolina Panthers with his snatch trap, in addition to pairing that with his athleticism. But Hardy just really from the scrimmage on just had good moments week after week after week at the cornerback spot. We'll see if he clears waivers. I don't think it's the end of the world that he got cut. I do think it's a surprise. I do think it's disappointing. Again, even if he did make the roster, he's probably corner 5. I think you're putting him behind Jamarcus Ingram. And even if you love him more than Jamarcus Ingram, okay, he's corner 4 behind Kaiir Elam. But with how much the cornerback position gets banged up, with Rasul Douglas, being a UFA next year, I think you can never have enough good cornerbacks on a team. I thought Hardy showed a lot of promise and ability. So I was surprised on that to see him get cut. I thought he was pretty close to a lock after how he played in each preseason game. Tying into that, Casey Toohill being cut. I think Toohill, and also to kind of put this in perspective, I think there are some moves that the Bills can make going forward, specifically with regard to the receiver position, which we're going to talk about in the next segment here. But I think Toohill, he's a hustle guy. He's a motor guy. I hate that people to say that, because I feel like it does that player a disservice and puts the wrong image into people's minds because it's not sexy and it's not fun at the edge position. But he was out for the entirety pretty much of training camp and the preseason, suited up for the Carolina game. Granted, it was his first game and first game action, and he had just started ramping things up. So maybe he was knocking the rust off, but I wasn't particularly impressed with how he played against Carolina. I made sure to keep an eye out for him because it was his only preseason opportunity to kind of see, like, all right, if this dude's going to make something happen, it's got to be in this game. And I literally made a note to myself that I felt bad for him because he only gets one game to kind of show what he can do. And his performance in that game wasn't too strong. He set the edge good against the run a couple times, but even as like a main run defending edge with a high motor and effort, I didn't love his performance. He doesn't really offer much from a pass rush perspective. I think he could be the first man out if the Bills make another roster move. If they need to release somebody because they want to sign somebody else and make a move, I think he's the first one that kind of gets dropped. Or I could be way out of the park on this one, and they really like him, and they think he's going to be a good depth guy and a motor guy, and there's value in that. But I didn't see that coming, mainly because he got no burn, which isn't really his fault because of the injuries, but he didn't get any burn this preseason, not a ton of camp action. And then he didn't really stand out in a positive manner against Carolina. Honestly, even from a standout perspective, he didn't really stand out at all. And Mitch saying Toohill shocked me the most. I guess I underestimated how they view him on special teams. Could be, yeah. Or maybe we just underestimated him overall because they just like the role that he plays, and he was brought in for a specific role and he was going to make it no matter what. To me, Casey Toohill being on the roster says he was going to make it no matter what, and this was already kind of preordained and determined, or it says he's right there on the fringe, and if there's another move they want to make, he's the first man out, and they're dropping him, and they're going to sign somebody else or do something else. I like this from Mark, who says, Young Dreezy made it. Did he really earn it, though? I like Young Dreezy as the nickname for Joe Andreessen. I like it better than Buffalo Joe. Young Dreezy is the name that Joe Andreessen needs to have. He did earn it. We're going to talk about it when we get to linebackers. But fair question to ask. And Steve says, Toohill's the casualty if we find someone we want to add, which is all fair. I'm just surprised to see, again, with how little we saw of him this offseason, and then almost a non-existent lackluster performance against Carolina, I didn't see it coming. But lo and behold, there we are. Last piece as well, linebacker, not too surprising for me, but Nicholas Moreau making the squad. So officially the linebackers as of now, you have Terrell Bernard, Dorian Williams, Balin Spector, Nicholas Moreau, Edifon Ulofoshio, Joe Andreessen, aka Young Dreezy, and then Matt Milano, who was put on the IR with a designated to return notification, which is something we are also going to speak about with another position group as we go forward here. So officially the Bills are keeping 6. If you want to get technical, it's 7 because Matt Milano on the IR designated to return this year. I like keeping Moreau. He's somebody who I've consistently said I would take him as linebacker 3. Like if it was Milano Bernard as the starters and a third linebacker had to come on the field, I would put Moreau out there. And even right now, I like the idea of Dorian Williams gaining more experience, and I think he made improvements from last year. I still think there's something to be desired when it comes to his processing and his play recognition and his diagnosing. And this is a really good way to say it from Just Tippy Canoe, who says Morrow just feels let me read this right. Morrow just feels safe. Safe can be a good thing. That's exactly what I think. He's just a known quantity, high floor, not sexy, capable starter, veteran. He's not going to make a huge difference. He's not a difference maker or a huge playmaker, but he's responsible. You know what you're getting. I would take that as my third linebacker behind Milano and Bernard. I would also take it next to Terrell Bernard for the athleticism and the upside that Dorian Williams gives you. I think there's something to be said for the processing and the misleading that happens to him in the pass game, whether it's play action or just pass stuff in general. He can still his eyes can still lead him by the wayside. I think they've caught up to his feet and to his athleticism much more so than they did last year, but there's still something that's needed there from a coverage standpoint in terms of spot drop, mainly in zone, spot drop zone, the match coverage stuff, but even with some man components as well. So I understand both sides of it, right? You know, you want to start Dorian Williams, you got the athleticism, year 2, you invested a day 2 pick on him last year. You want him to start to develop and take kind of that next step in the journey. But for me right now, I just feel more comfortable with Nicholas Moreau on the field, but I'm a little surprised that he made the squad just because that means they keep 6 linebackers, not including Matt Milano, and he has not played this preseason, this camp, hasn't been able to really get it going with the groin/core muscle injury that he's had. But I also think that how many linebackers they capped, and we're going to get more into this when we talk linebackers. I think that also speaks to the special teams value at the linebacker position, maybe more so this year than years past because of the new kickoff coverage rules and all that kind of stuff. This is a good one from Lauren, who says Tuhill has a double letter last name and Bean loves double letter last names, #science. I mean, you're smart. You know where you work. I'm not going to put it on blast, but you're smart. So if anybody knows science, you know science. That makes sense. And John says, add Lauren. I didn't realize that. I'll keep an eye out going forward. Could be. Yeah, and here's the piece from Just the Tip of Canoe, right? With regards to Moore, we said we overthink it sometimes. He was a solid piece on the Eagles. That's got to mean something. I know the Eagles fell apart last year, especially on defense. And again, he's not sexy. There's not a ton of upside. I don't think you take Nicholas Moreau and plug him into a defense and that defense changes and is revolutionized. But I think it's something to be said for just having a known quantity safe aspect out there, especially with the veteran experience that he has, the knowledge, the know-how. So we'll see kind of what happens there. Ryan says, if you rearrange the letters of Casey Tuhill's name, it spells Noah Brown. I like that. I like that a lot. Let's tie that into the next piece here. Wants, maybe even some needs going forward. A lot of you have said it in the chat. I tweeted it earlier today. I really want Noah Brown. That's just for me. I did a profile on him earlier this offseason when pre-free agency in February. I ID'd him as a good fit with this Bills offense just because of his size, his frame, his skill set, but also the anticipated cost. He went back to the Houston Texans on a 1-year, $4 million deal, which I found surprising at the time, just given who else was there. I figured somebody from the Texans wide receiver corps was going to get dropped. They have Nico Collins, they have Diggs, they have Tank Dell, and then it's Noah Brown and John Mechie and Robert Woods and Xavier Hutchinson, and then they signed Ben Skoranek this offseason too. I was just somebody's got to drop. I thought it would be Robert Woods. I thought maybe it would be John Mechie because they could get some trade value for him. Nabil says in the comments, I'm surprised the Texans didn't release Robert Woods and said, I thought Woods combined Robert and Woods and made Woods. That actually kind of sounds sweet. But yeah, I thought Bobby Trees would be the odd man out. He was not. I do like Noah Brown and just what he can do, who he is, and also his fit within. I'm pulling up my notes right now on him because I have them on my phone and not on my note page typed up already because I'm an embarrassment and messed up. Scroll, everybody mute yourself. There we go. So Noah Brown, he attacks leverage and sells routes with body language, toughness after the catch. He wins consistently downfield on sits, hooks, overs, posts, and corners. He transitions well from receiver to runner, and he can separate with physicality in his stem or at the break. There were times last year where the Texans wide receivers were banged up. And when he had to answer the call, he answered the call. And his size listed at 6'2", 215 pounds, I should say. He can function as a blocker in addition to being an actual receiver. He has some inside outside versatility, and seeing what he could be coming from the Texans offense, given the role that he had there and just their use of condensed formations and having reduced formational width. I just thought he would fit well in this offense that I thought would use more condensed formations this year, more reduced formational width, receivers that can block and insert, but also function in the play action game and also get vertical. He really can do a lot of things. I think it would be an absolutely tremendous wide receiver 5. I would drop Marquez Valdes-Scantling and pick up Noah Brown immediately right now. And actually, good question from Mitch. Mitch, you're crushing it tonight. Mitch says, can Noah Brown play special teams? Just wondering, because I know guys towards the bottom of the depth chart usually need to play teams. Great question. And he can play special teams. So again, in Houston last year, he had more of a prime wide receiver role. He was kind of like wide receiver 3 once Tank Dell went down, and then Nico Collins missed some time. Actually, he was kind of wide receiver 3 in the mix with Robert Woods already. But then Tank Dell went down with that broken leg, I think, and Collins missed some time. So he played more actual offense and special teams, but his special teams snaps by year. So he's been in the league since 2017. His total special team snaps from 2017 through last year in order: 2017, 118, 2018, 161, 2020, 213, 2021, 198, 2022, 79. All of those seasons were with Dallas. Last year was his first and only year up until this point, which isn't going to happen now because he got released with the Houston Texans, and he had 31 last year. You're seeing him, and if you're looking at everything, he's got punt return coverage experience, kick return experience. So he's literally running the gamut: kick return, kick coverage, punt return, punt coverage, all of the aspects that you would like. So he is going to give you some special teams value in addition to, again, I just think he can do a lot of things. He can block, he can function underneath and in the intermediate. He's more of a vertical element or piece than he gets credit for, especially if he's running deep overs. He understands how to set those overs up and sell vertical and then snap it off and go across the field. He knows how to lean into a corner and break it off, or how to open up a safety to the wrong direction and then cut underneath him back the other way. If you want to see, no, I don't want to, because it'll mess things up. Go to my, I hate to do like a plug like this, but my Twitter page. So at pro__ant, pro 2 ANT, just search pro space ant Noah Brown, and you'll see a bunch of the stuff that I posted today with it regard to his profile and who he is. So yeah, he can play special teams, function inside, outside. He's a good blocker. He can work in those condensed formations and those sets with reduced formational width, because Houston did it a ton last year. I just think he's a really good fit. I would have taken him over Mac Hollins. I like Mac Hollins. I would have taken Noah Brown ahead of him back during free agency. I kind of would still take him over him now, and I would take him over MBS as well. Pop saying, if they sign Noah Brown, who would they release? My thought would be Marquez Valdes-Scantling, although, again, I know the money, even though he's basically got a whole bunch of void years for the next 3 or so years. I would drop MVS. I would drop Casey Toohill. Those would be one of my first 2 moves that I would be looking towards. I also know you can also get, and we're going to talk about when we get to receivers, but you can get kind of involved in the roster gamesmanship aspect. MVS has a neck injury. Do you put him on the IR? Who do you put on the IR for season ending? Who do you put on the IR designated to return? The gamesmanship you can kind of go in with. But if I had to release someone, like I would right now, and I feel bad saying this because these are jobs for these guys and this is their livelihood. But I would drop MVS right now and bring in Noah Brown. No questions asked. I would love Noah Brown is my wide receiver 5 on any team. But I think he actually can be a little bit more than that, given, again, what he can be as a blocker, how he functions in the play action game, his size, his frame, and his skill set, and how he wins. So we'll see. I also know, just to stay on that, the wants, I know John Mechie was a fun one. I flirted with the idea of Mechie as well. His preseason tape looked good. He's 3 years removed from that ACL tear in 2021, a couple years, I believe, removed from his leukemia diagnosis. But he looked good this preseason. He's always been a good route runner, but he's got that good route running element, but the juice is coming back. He operates with deception. He's got some suddenness. He's got good hands. He's looked really good for Houston. Issue is you're just going to have to trade for him. All the other issue with John Mechie for me, I don't necessarily love his fit as much as I do Noah Brown. If there was no Curtis Samuel or Khalil Shakir, I would love Mechie much more. I'd still take him because I got no problem adding a good wide receiver to my football team, but I like Mechie more as Shakir and Samuel insurance, whereas Noah Brown, I think, is a direct fit given the schematic direction of the offense this year and how I kind of think that they're going to take. But I would not be opposed to Mechie. Those are my two biggest wants just because of how the receiver room has shaped up based on what the roster is and also with the murkiness of MBS's potential neck injury, also just with how he's played. I would like an upgrade at the wide receiver 5 spot. And also, again, I just don't want to put too much on Keon Coleman right away. And so having a dude that can just plug and play right now, like Noah Brown or even John Mechie, again, I think Noah Brown is much more realistic. And also because of Noah Brown's service years, he's a straight up free agent. So he got cut. He can sign with anyone wherever he wants. So I'm hoping that is with the Buffalo Bills. What else? Anything else? Oh, Frank C says Paris Campbell. I like him as a possible Samuel backup. You could. I just think Paris Campbell's never really been a known quantity or a thing as much as people have wanted him to be. The speed is there, which is fun. I think the direction of this offense this year, the receivers are going to have to function in the run game as blockers. They're going to need to be able to be physical against not just like corners and slots, but against like linebackers and edges. You got to be able to dig out safeties and to do all, kind of a little bit of everything in the run game. And I think Noah Brown can do that much more than Paris Campbell can. And I think his receiving ability is kind of a little bit forgotten in that regard. I'm going to scroll back for some comments. What else? Nice comment here from Robert about Dorian Williams saying, hope is not a plan, but here I am hoping that Dorian Williams develops. I wanted to come back to this one just because I've talked about it before, but I don't want the development of Dorian Williams and Terrell Bernard and their career trajectories. I don't want those two things to get conflated. I know a lot of people doubted Terrell Bernard at this point last year. Actually, at this point last year, I think it was still a question for a lot of people whether it was going to be Dotson or Bernard starting next to Matt Milano. And then the year that Bernard had, I don't want people to use that as a barometer for Dorian Williams and think, well, look at what happened once Bernard got on the field and that experience and his trajectory and how much better he got. I just don't think it's apples to apples for those two, even though they're both linebackers. The system that Dorian Williams came from in college at Tulane is vastly different than Terrell Bernard's system that he came from at Baylor. Baylor plays a very NFL pro-ready style of defense, and Dave Aranda is the coach there, and Aranda's scheme and system fits very well with what Sean McDermott does. There's a lot of same principles and identity philosophical pieces or identity and philosophy pieces within that as well. So Bernard was better prepared for the NFL and better prepared specifically for Sean McDermott's defense. Dorian Williams was not. Dorian Williams was basically running like Madden type coverages at Tulane with your basic spot drop type of stuff. So I just don't want those trajectories to get confused. I know you're not saying that here, Robert. I just wanted to use your comment as a jump off point for that conversation piece. But that being said, let's go position group by position group. We are going to start with the quarterbacks. And again, like I mentioned, those of you playing at home, as we go position group by position group, I want to hear your thoughts. Is this a position group that you can do what with? Like how quantify, basically I want everyone here to quantify how good is the Buffalo Bills roster. And we're going to start by quantifying each position group. And so if you're thinking about it, just put it into a perspective of again, we're going to start with the quarterbacks now that Mike White is on it, which we're going to talk about. Shout out to the chat for knocking that down. But just putting it into perspective of how good is this position group? Is it good enough to win a division? Is it good enough to get to the playoffs with? Is it good enough to win a conference or a Super Bowl, to use that as kind of our baseline measurement, and then again put it all together in determining how good this roster is for the Buffalo Bills. A shout out. Oh, good job, Pops, for answering that question. Cash asked if Travis Clayton made the team. Pop said Clayton is on the IR, and that is correct. Well done to Pops. Yeah, Travis Clayton is on the IR. So we'll see what kind of happens for him. All right, so let's start with the quarterback grouping, which I think is fun. Again, everything I'm going to talk about it, what the group is on paper and what they are from a schematic potential and usage standpoint. So as the chat was so kind for announcing earlier in this. Oh, actually, let me, Josh says, Ant, can we please get to the explanation of how Evans made it over Frank Gore Jr.? We absolutely can once we get to running backs, which is the next position group after quarterback. So we will get to that, but just put a pin in that moment or in that question for now. And I started just to make sure I don't forget about it. So Justin says, just joined. Did we outrage about Gore Jr. yet? Not yet. We haven't gotten to running backs, but we will get there shortly. Justin, I like that. Josh says Super Bowl with our QB, Josh. Yes, I think if you're looking at the position group, this is a grouping good enough to get you the Super Bowl, good enough to win a Super Bowl for you. I think Josh Allen, even for the most critical of analysts and pundits, I think Josh Allen is, I don't know. I'm thinking of somebody who would rank him like the worst. What, it's probably like top 5, top 6, top 7, even for anyone. But I think most people have him comfortably in the top 2 or 3 quarterbacks in the NFL. He should be in everyone's top 5. I think he's the second or third best QB in the league, depending on what you're looking for. Yeah, the QB room is set, as James says in the chat. As long as Josh is healthy, the QB room is set. So what we had before today, before the Mike White news, was just 2 guys on the roster. It was Josh Allen and Mitch Trubisky. However, I didn't expect it to stay that way just because of Mitch Trubisky's injury. He's probably going to be out through September, probably into October, maybe November-ish. We'll see how much gamesmanship there is with his knee injury. And RJ says, but apparently he's the most overrated quarterback in the league. I get it for some, right? Especially for NFL execs or personnel people who, if you have a defensive-minded guy or somebody who really values taking care of the football, they're going to think Josh Allen is less than he is because of how much he turns the football over. They're not going to look at big-time throws and big-time throw percentage. They're not going to look at a lot of the elements and the yin and the yang of Josh Allen. They're just going to look at the elements where he kind of doesn't function traditionally. And I think that's kind of where things get lost in translation. Extra Crispy says, floor for us is 8 wins. Ceiling is 13 and 14. Very fair. Well done again, Lauren. Lauren says, even Larry David would agree that Josh Allen is pretty good. Well done. Well done. Pop says, I thought Milano knocked Mike White out of the league. Yeah, he speared him with like one of the most picture-perfect textbook hits and tackles you can have in the current modern NFL. Even by old school standards, it was beautiful, but especially now, it was forceful, it was impactful, it was clean. Yeah, I don't think there's too much to write home when it comes to the quarterback grouping. If you have Josh Allen, you have a chance to win every single game. I think that position grouping is good enough to get you a division title, to get you a conference championship, and then get you to a Super Bowl. And again, we'll see what happens with Mitch Trubisky. I expect Mitch Trubisky to get put on the IR. Designated to return or not is something of note and of interest. And I like the floor that Mike White gives you. All kind of jokes aside of him getting rocked by Milano a couple seasons ago, he kind of played admirably for that Jets squad and had him in some games and put up some numbers. And there's 2 sides of the conversation with the backup quarterback, right? Like if Josh Allen goes down, the season's kind of done, so who cares? But also you still want to be able to have somebody that can mitigate that loss and still try and keep you on schedule and do some things. I like the idea of Mike White. I think he is your prototypical, insert backup quarterback vernacular here of a game manager and a guy who keeps you on schedule and doesn't do anything sexy, but kind of keeps you on the right spot and at the right moment. So we'll kind of see what he can be. I like the idea, again, of him coming in now, getting the rest of this week and all of next week to get ready. And then, hopefully nothing happens to Josh Allen before that or week 1 and just keeps having the opportunity to learn and grow. And then again, we'll just see what happens with Mitch Trubisky here on the roster as of now, based on his health. Like he's unable to play in week 1 at the bare minimum, but more so going forward as well. So I knew there would be another quarterback that would be brought in. I was even down for someone like Bailey Zappi. I don't think you're going to bring a sexy backup quarterback in at this point. I think the sexiest would have been like Dorian Thompson-Robinson from Cleveland, but I believe Cleveland kept him as they kept like 4 QBs or something like that. So Mike White, I think, does you a solid. Also, he has some knowledge of the Miami Dolphins playbook because that's where he was most recently. So maybe that helps you kind of one up the Dolphins a little bit. And again, I just think he does good backup quarterback stuff. Keeps you on schedule, isn't going to hurt you, isn't going to, have these high variance plays in terms of sexiness. But I think he's a modern NFL quarterback, which is all you want at that spot. And Trubisky kind of looked like a deficiency. So maybe it's even an upgrade over Trubisky. And again, so now we'll keep an eye out in terms of what happens with Trubisky. Does he get put on the IR? Does he get put on the IR with a designation to return? Kind of knock all that down and kind of see what we get. And as Dennis says here, Mike White fought like a champ. Impressive seeing a guy take so many hits and keep going. That's a good spot too, right? He got laid out by Milano and hurt and I think it was cracked or broken ribs. He was still the proverbial took a licking and kept on ticking. So, he's tough. He earns the respect of dudes in the locker room. And I just think he's a solid dude to have as a backup quarterback. So good times for Mike White, a welcomed addition. I think he was in that tier of backup quarterbacks I would like to see. Again, guys, like I mentioned, like Bailey Zappi, dudes that were going to be cheap, but can come in and function as your number 2 QB. I like this from Justin. It says, Mike White gives me Tommy Maddox vibes. You can win, but you don't want him as your starter. Random, I know. No, I love that comparison. I remember Tommy Maddox lighting up the XFL and then being the Steelers QB for a little bit. He won that, or he was in that game where they came back against Cleveland. It was Tommy Maddox versus Kelly Holcomb, Steelers versus Browns playoffs. That was like one of the best playoff games I had ever seen up until that point. Even now, that game was sweet. And then, it was the starter when they drafted Roethlisberger, and then Tommy Maddox gave way to Roethlisberger. Nice. Ralph says, wasn't it like 5 crack ribs? Yeah, he got jacked up, and he was still willing to keep on going. I think he even played through it a little bit, too. So kudos to him for being a tough guy, which is pretty sweet to seeing your backup quarterback. All right, now running back. A couple comments already regarding Frank Gore. So Frank Gore Jr. was cut today. The Bills official roster as of right now, the initial 53, you got James Cook, Ty Johnson, and Ray Davis. A very interesting one. The 4th running back there is noted in the chat earlier, Mr. Darrington Evans. But what's really interesting with Darrington Evans here is, like Matt Milano, Darrington Evans got a injured reserve designation, but the injured reserve designated to return note alongside of it. You get 8 IR players who can return in the season. If you make the playoffs, you get an extra 2. So if you make the playoffs, you get 10. If you don't, you get 8. So just as of right now, you get 8 dudes who can return once they're placed on IR. They've essentially already used 2 with Matt Milano and Darrington Evans. So that to me, and I think most people would signal and or imply that once Darrington Evans is off of the IR, he will be on the actual game day roster, or, maybe he's inactive, but he's going to be on like the 53. Like they want him to come back to again, put that designation on somebody to come back is very interesting. And to have it be your 4th running back is also very interesting. And then even within that, I like the group. I like Cook. I like Davis. I think Ty Johnson's a really underrated RB3. I like Frank Gore Jr. I did a breakdown of his game against Carolina. And I like what he offers, but I think a lot of people are sleeping on Ty Johnson, how good he was under Joe Brady last year, even how good he was with the Jets several years ago. Ty Johnson's a good RB3, gives you some special teams value, can function as a run blocker, like in 22 pony personnel. He also pass protect. He can catch the football. He runs behind his pads. He doesn't have the speed or the long speed that Cook does, but he's got some good juice from the 10-yard split in the 20-yard area, which helps him get downhill and run behind his pads with his size. So I think Ty Johnson's a good RB3 for me. I'd lock him in at that. So Darrington Evans getting the IR designated to return designation, I think is really interesting. And then in terms of, again, to go back to that starred comment there from Josh saying, can we please get to the explanation on how Evans made it over Frank Gore Jr.? I think they're just 2 different kinds of running backs, right? Gore is an efficient runner, a north and south type of dude, not a bunch of wiggle, not a bunch of shake to his game. I describe it as he's a very professional runner, a no-nonsense type of runner. He knows how to read his blocks, sets up his blocks well. I think he's an offensive, lineman-friendly type of running back because he uses what is there. He consistently falls forward. He falls through contact, fights through contact. But you still don't know what he is in terms of a pass protector. You don't know too much of what he is in the receiving game, although he had some nice catches and receptions and plays out in space this year in the preseason. But Evans is more juice. He's more long speed. He's more wiggle. He's more shake. He's more in the receiving game as a runner and as a running back, in addition to being a runner. And then he also gives you some special teams value, whether it's return on punt or return on kick, or maybe even just because of his long speed, you want to use him on some coverage units. I think he just offers a little more of a overall and well-rounded skill set as opposed to Gore. I like Frank Gore Jr. a lot. I really, 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 really hope he comes back on the practice squad. But I'm not completely surprised to see Evans, in theory, make it over him. I noted it on the show last week. I noted it in my video on Gore yesterday. I think you can kind of make a case either or for Evans or for Gore, just depending on what kind of skill set you're looking for. Or I thought they could honestly try and keep them both, given the fact that they are two different styles of runners. Again, I hope Gore comes back. I like what he put on tape this preseason, and I like how he runs. I like how he approaches the game. I don't think he's somebody that's going to turn 5 into 15 or a 10-yard gain into 20 or a 12-yard gain into a house call, but he is somebody that'll turn a 3-yard gain into 5 or a 5-yard gain into 8 or 9. And I think there's a lot of value of having a guy who can get hit at the 3 or the 2 and fall forward and turn it into a touchdown, or a guy who can turn 1st and 10 into 2nd and 6 or 2nd and 5 instead of just having it be 2nd and 7. Those yards all add up, and especially from a play calling standpoint, your menu is different in terms of 2nd and long versus 2nd and medium versus 2nd and short. So I think Gore is somebody that's going to be on somebody's practice squad. If he clears waivers, it'll be through the Bills. If not, I could see him being claimed by somebody else. I just think he has a professional approach. The name recognition will help him. I am disappointed again to see him be cut. I didn't think he was going to make the 53. Again, I didn't think he was going to jump Ty Johnson for RB3, so he wasn't making the 53. But I hope he gets a practice squad designation, which would be really, really, really nice. Lauren says Bean is Horcrux hunting. Milano goes down. He signs the player he most notably tackled, check. Signs the local Buffalo resident and several UB players, check. And then signs a man wide receiver from the biggest rival, check. I love that. Bean's a Harry Potter guy. He's Horcrux hunting. I like that. Oh, I missed a super chat. I'm so sorry. Mark C says Cook's drops will definitely hit different if Gore goes to an AFC rival. Hands off Andy Reid. So Mark does not want to see Frank Gore Jr. end up with the Kansas City Chiefs. I wouldn't want to see that either. I understand the issue on Cook, right? But there is something I don't remember where that tweet was or when I tweeted it, but I wanted to pull up some numbers for him. Because again, I know he had the drops last year. He had 7 drops last year. The percentage was not good for him. Just based on how many targets and what he had. So his drop percentage last year was 11.9%, regular season and postseason, which is high. But he only had 7 drops. So I know they came in high leverage situations. He dropped a touchdown, actually dropped 2 touchdowns. He dropped that big one against Philly, dropped what would have been a touchdown against Dallas. So I know he's had high profile drops or in high leverage moments. I don't think the drops are as big of an issue as people kind of make it out to be. And even within that, I'm going to pull up this tweet from Twitter because and I know advanced metrics don't kind of make everything better, but the raw stats of who he was and the numbers he put up and how effective he was for this offense last year. There we go. His receiving ranks last year amongst 46 running backs that had at least 30 targets. He was 4th in EPA per target, 2nd in positive play percentage, 2nd in yards per target, 2nd in yards per reception, 7th in yards per route run, 8th in total yards, tied for 4th in touchdowns, tied for 17th in overall receptions, and 3rd in quarterback rating when targeted. That includes all the drops. So again, those drops are not good. I'm not coming out and saying I don't care how much he drops the ball and 7 is no big deal and 11.9% is fine. I don't like those drops. I want those to go down. But even within those drops, he had a super strong year as a pass catching running back last year. And so, we'll kind of see what he is this year. I feel you though, like if the same week that Cook has a drop, Frank Gore balls out for an AFC rival, I kind of see how that would be super frustrating. And I could see Twitter melting down for Bill's Twitter if that was to happen. And also, again, Mark, thank you very much for being here. And thank you very much for the super chat. I really appreciate it. And yeah, I do hope we have hands off for Andy Reid because they have a good offensive line. And, I wish Frank Gore success anywhere he goes, but I just hope it's not with a team that hurts my heart. RJ says, please don't tell me Baby Gore is going to Kansas City. I just can't handle the fact the organization trolls us constantly. Oh, this is very nice, Lauren. Thank you very much. Lauren says, Anthony's the best. Keep the super chats coming. Just show him some love. I appreciate you for that, Lauren. Thank you very much. Super chats, likes, kind words, fruit baskets sent to my house. Anything would be accepted. Thank you very much for Lauren. That's tremendous. I like this from Pop saying, imagine the 49ers grabbing Gore. That would be super cool. Also, they have such a run-friendly scheme. I could see him balling out, but, McCaffrey and then Mason are a pretty sweet 1-2. Kind of see what happens there. But yeah, and Jamal says, what topic are we on? We just finished talking about the running back position. So that's kind of the running back in a nutshell. Why I think Evans made it over Gore. I could have gone either way. I like them both. I would have liked having both of them. I also think Gore doesn't have a lot of speed or juice or athleticism to his game. He's more of a short puncher or a short punchy type of runner than he is kind of this long burner. Again, like we talked about, he's not busting off these big runs, but I think Darrington Evans could, given the juice and speed that he plays with. It's a different skill set in terms of what he is as more of a scat back, and Gore is more of a traditional north and south type of runner. So a little bit of a different flavor, but again, I hope he gets brought back on the practice squad. I do think this is a good group. I think James Cook, Ray Davis, and Ty Johnson is a group that you can win a division title with. I know what Cook's numbers were last year, and kind of, I just mentioned some of them from a receiving aspect. I know what he was in the upper echelon in terms of a runner and receiver and how productive that he was. I don't know if he is in that tier schematically, although I do think he's good. And I like Ray Davis and I like Ty Johnson. I like this running back room. I think it's one of the strengths of the team. I think this, if I had to quantify it, I think this is a group that you can win a division title with. And I think this is a team, I don't want to put the caveat in there, but I think this is a position group that you could get to a Super Bowl with, depending on what your wide receiver core looked like and depending on what your offensive line looks like. Good news is I think the Bills have a good O-line, and I think they have a good offensive line coach. So I think this is a running back room that you could get to a Super Bowl with, but at the very least, this is a group that you can win a division with and compete for a conference championship with, which is what I like. Let's go next. How do we have this laid out? The next position we're going to talk about, I guess technically fullback. Reggie Gilliam made the 53. No news there, no notes. Fullback / H-back / special teams value. Could maybe do some tight end stuff. I like Reggie Gilliam. I know he's not used a ton, but he made the squad. Next after that, so I'm going to take a drink of water, and then we're going to talk about the wide receiver position. Man, it's crazy hot. For some reason, the AC isn't working in the office, so I've got the windows open, and it's not helping. Like, I am hot and uncomfortable, but people suffer for their art, and here I am suffering for mine. Bills kept 5 wide receivers. Talked a little about it earlier, in regards to the wants of wanting Noah Brown big time and potentially John Mechie. But the Bills kept 5 wide receivers: Curtis Samuel, Keon Coleman, Khalil Shakir, Matt Collins, and Marquez Valdez-Scantling, a.k.a. MVS. Joe says, I can't believe they cut the most hyped RB of the preseason, KJ Hamler. They cut a lot of receivers today. The Justin Shorter hive is disappointed. I think there may have been a Tyrell Shavers hive. They're disappointed. Claypool was done and dusted earlier in camp once he got hurt, so that was kind of done. And as Pop says, Shavers was so good at camp. Yeah, he was. He had some flashes. He had some buzz. I thought he had some really good run blocking reps against Pittsburgh, but I just don't think there was any receiver that kind of stuck their claim or staked their claim towards carving out wide receiver 6 or even necessarily beating out MVS as wide receiver 5. I don't love the idea of MVS at wide receiver 5. I think he's fine for what he is. Gives you a little bit of blocking ability in addition to just being a vertical threat and having the speed element, the experience that he has, and knowing how to get open and knowing how to work professionally in an NFL offense. But the route running just isn't consistent, and the drops, like everybody knows, like he's a a streaky player or like a flash player in every sense of the word, right? He will drop 2 or 3 passes and you never want to see a ball throw to him ever again. And then it just feels like he comes up with the biggest catch in the biggest moment, like he did against the Ravens in the AFC Championship to kind of basically ice that game. Like he just seems to show up in big games and in big moments, but on the whole, he's not very consistent. The most consistent thing about him is his inconsistency. Had an ugly drop in week 1 against the Bears. Not a bunch of great blocking reps against the Bears. Improved a little bit with his blocking against the Steelers, but still not great. Also has that neck injury. Also doesn't really offer you anything in terms of special teams. And as that comment mentioned earlier from Mitchell saying, does Noah Brown offer special teams value? We know those depth guys on the Bills roster usually contribute on special teams. MVS is a depth guy, and he doesn't really play special teams. So I still think there could be some gamesmanship that happens here with MVS. I could see him being a regular game day inactive. I could see him maybe potentially getting an IR stint. I could see him potentially still getting released if something else comes available. I don't love him as wide receiver 5. I'm fine with him if he sticks and if he stays. He was brought on because of his speed element and the verticality and the professional, experience that he has with the Packers, with the Chiefs, just kind of knowing how to approach the game. But I just think from a skill set standpoint, he is limited. From a role standpoint, he is limited. And then again, even just the basic thing, like the hands are not ideal. So I'm not too pleased with MVS. James says the wide receiver room has potential to improve, but at this point it is an average C. Looking at the wide receiver room right now, again, Curtis Samuel, Keon Coleman, Khalil Shakir, Matt Collins, Marquez Valdes-Scantling. I'm going to give it the line that I gave it earlier this offseason. I think so much of the offense in terms of what it's going to be this year really hinges on Joe Brady. I think this offense has a lot of schematic potential more so than it does talent and names on paper. So I think a lot of how successful this receiver room will be tied to how good the Bills' run game is, how well they're able to mix in condensed formations and reduce formational width and pair that with motion and play action and all of these elements to really dress things up and increase the scope and the breadth of the offensive presentation and put defenses into a bind. On paper, I do not think this is a Super Bowl winning wide receiver room as of now. If Keon Coleman is ahead of schedule, you're looking at some really good potential with Curtis Samuel, Keon Coleman, and Khalil Shakir. And again, if we're including Dawson Knox as a pass catcher, I think it changes the notion of the receiver room or pass catchers. But if we're just talking receivers, I think this is kind of like a wild card type grouping in terms of where it gets you. Curtis Samuel, I like, but I think he's much more fit as kind of like a low to mid wide receiver 2 or more of a schematic mismatch wide receiver 3/2 type of guy. Shakir, I'm hoping he can vault himself into the wide receiver 2 conversation. We just haven't seen it yet. Keon Coleman, we don't know what he is. Matt Collins, I like, but I don't like him as this target monster, true wide receiver 1 or wide receiver 2. I like him as a high snap share guy, good blocker, being able to block at all 3 levels of the defense, but then being able to function in the pass game off of that and having value attached to it. And then we talked about MVS already. Not ideal. And then Curtis Samuel gets banged up a bunch from time to time. So I don't hate this grouping on paper or individually, but I think if you look at it on paper, this doesn't scream like, man, that's a Super Bowl group of wide receivers or that's a conference winning group of wide receivers. Now, the Ravens went to the AFC Championship last year, and I hate using these examples because the scheme is so important and some of the individual players are super important. But if you wanted to, play the silver lining game and ignore a bunch of context, you could be like, hey, the Ravens went to the AFC Championship last year, and they didn't have a stud group of wide receivers. And hey, the Chiefs won the Super Bowl last year, and their receivers were largely ineffective for a majority of the year. So maybe wide receivers not important, so on and so forth, and all that kind of stuff. But I really do hope Noah Brown is brought into this squad. And don't get it twisted. I'm not sitting here saying like, man, if they bring in Noah Brown, he's wide receiver 1 and he changes everything about this offense. But I do think he is a well-rounded contingency plan for the wide receiver room and can do so many things and wear a bunch of hats. And that provides a lot of value to a team that's going to run the football, use play action and motion, and rely on Josh Allen just kind of being sweet and having a good offensive line. Someone like Noah Brown just fits so well into this offense and could help this team so much schematically. Again, I don't think Noah Brown's a needle mover where you put his name on paper and you're like, you know what? Now they're a Super Bowl winning wide receiver room, because I don't think that's the case. But based on the direction I think this offense is going in, I think Noah Brown moves the needle in a very positive way. But again, a lot of this wide receiver room, what it is going to be really dependent on Joe Brady setting them up for success, because again, it's just not this individual talented group on paper where it's just set it and forget it. You know, you have 1 to 2 or 3 guys who can win in very specific ways and are very established in their roles. Even Khalil Shakir, who I like, and I know a lot of people like, we still haven't really seen him be anything other than a down the stretch impact guy and more of like a target 3 or 4 type of role. Now you're looking at him. Are you looking at him to be wide receiver 2? Is he really wide receiver 1? Like, who's the wide receiver 1 on this team? Is it Curtis Samuel? I know people want it to be Keon Coleman, but I don't think it is right now. Is it Samuel? Is it Shakir? Shakir is probably wide receiver 2 at worst. Is he ready for that type of role? Like, there's so many ifs and so much of a lacking in terms of known quantity for the receiver room that really just kind of has me worried about the grouping from an individual on paper talent perspective. But again, I think you have a lot of schematic potential given the combination of athleticism, size, and frame at the wide receiver room. But again, it's going to be on Joe Brady to maximize that. Extra Crispy says this wide receiver group does not have a clear number 1, so it's going to be a committee. I agree. Oh, I got to stop. Just Tippy Canoe. Thank you very much for being here, as I mentioned earlier, and having a baller name. It's one of my favorites, if not my favorite, straight up. And thank you for the super chat. I really appreciate it. The comment is, I truly believe if you take the bookends of our tight ends and our O-line, it's one of the best in the league. We will be able to dictate a lot up front. I want to see this O-line play together, but I thought the Bills had a top 10 grouping last year overall. If Osiris Torrance takes a jump in his game, if Spencer Brown can improve a little on what he was last year, man, yeah, having Deion Dawkins, Spencer Brown, Osiris Torrance, I think Edwards is much better than people give him credit for. I think you do have a solid grouping up front, especially in terms of what you can do schematically. You can run the ball, you can pass the ball, you can run zone, you can run gap schemes. You're not running a ton of power and counter because you don't have the most mobile guards, but you do have extremely mobile and athletic tackles, which is why they run dart and, those tackle pulls and tackle traps with Brown and Dawkins. And even some of the depth I like as well. And then, yeah, if you factor in Kincaid and Knox and Quentin Morris, which we're going to talk about in a bit, I think it's a pretty fair statement. And thank you again for the super chat. I appreciate it. Like this comment here from Lauren saying, really need Kincaid to take a big step forward, especially as a tight end wide receiver hybrid type of player to help out the wide receiver core. Absolutely. Like for me, wide receiver 1 is Dalton Kincaid. I know he's not a wide receiver, obviously, but he's wide receiver 1 to me. The tip of the spear or the foundation of the passing game from a weapon standpoint is Dalton Kincaid for the Buffalo Bills. And as A Crossing says, scheme will be everything. Absolutely. Absolutely. Oh, Mega Bob saying Keon Coleman, less yards, but lots of TDs. I see him as a 40 catch, 400 yard, 8 touchdown guy this year. I can see something like that happening. Him being used in red zone packages and having kind of schemed up looks to lean into the skill set that he has already while he develops the refinement aspects and the more technical aspects of being a receiver in the league. I like that. What are some other thoughts? Okay, cool. I just want to make sure I grabbed everything. Extra Crispy says, so the strength of our offense will come from the tight ends and running backs. I think the strength of the offense comes from a good run game and how the offense schematically branches off from there. And I want to be careful in saying that because I don't want people to think this is going to be a run-first team where it's a 60-40 run-to-pass ratio. But the run game is going to matter a lot. The running back run game and the Josh Allen run game. That's where everything starts. Having the size, the combination of size and athleticism that you have at wide receiver and tight end screams you're going to run the football and put defenses into a bind and then use those same personnel groupings that you use to go with reduced formational width and run it down someone's throat, and then use that same grouping to go spread and throw it all over them because you have the athleticism in addition to having the size and frame and mashing ability. Basically, the strength of the Bills offense, in theory, should come from 11 and 12 personnel and being able to access more of the play calling menu without having to turn the page. And what I mean by that is you can be in 11 personnel, which is one running back, one tight end, 3 wide receivers, and you can go spread or you can go condensed and you can run it down someone's throat. You can pass the ball. You can do anything you really want. And then you can be in 12 and you can do the exact same thing. So defenses can't look from the box and be like, oh, they're in 12. Cool. They're probably going to run it. Let's do this. The Bills can really kind of do whatever they want out of 12 and out of 11 because of the combination of size and athleticism that they have at that spot. Yeah, that's why I said it, RJ. RJ says KC and Baltimore literally had everything else except for wide receiver. The Bills really don't have a good overall team like that. That's why I said, like, if you want to look at the silver lining and ignore all the context, sure, you can kind of lean into that. Jim Jack says, do you know how we rank in the waiver wire? Yes, it's the same as the draft order. So the Bills are, I forget what pick the Bills had because they traded out twice on draft night in the first round. But whatever the first round draft order is what the waiver wire order is. Yeah, so John says, I heard Bean say mid to late 20s. Yeah, so whatever they were, 25, 26, something like that. Oh, Josh says, Ant, who is your wide receiver difference maker? Oh, if he's healthy, Curtis Samuel. Just because I think of how he can be used and the mismatches he can be kind of created. Got a super chat. Thank you very much for being here, your boy Lettuce. And for the super chat, he says 2024 Dalton Kincaid needs to be 2019 Swole Beasley. Yeah, Kincaid, I think he actually needs to be more than that. I think Kincaid needs to be the mismatch creator underneath and in the intermediate. He needs to be the security blanket for Allen. He needs to be that leverage option read type of guy in the slot. But he also needs to be a ball winner. He also needs to be like a deep intermediate and down the field threat. You need to be able to get him mismatched on safeties and being able to run him over, on deep overs, like Y cross type stuff, or having him run a corner route and have him get like 17 to 25 yard chunk plays. He needs to be a lot. Dalton Kincaid very much needs to be kind of like the prince that was promised when it comes to the pass catching game. Again, I know he's not a wide receiver, but he needs to function like wide receiver 1 this year. And that's going to unlock so much of this offense. If he isn't kind of the prince that was promised, then it's going to be kind of tough. And yeah, as you follow up here and says Cole did a lot of his work in the intermediate. Yep. You need Kincaid to be that guy. You need Kincaid beating nickel corners and apex dudes who he has size on. You need him to beat them with his size. And then if he's getting matched up on linebackers or safeties, he needs to beat them with his athleticism and his route running. You need him to be a constant mismatch in the slot as a quasi X receiver and number 1 outside. Like, you need to be able to use him in a variety of ways, inline, offline, hipped off of Dawson Knox, play action, non-play action. Just, he needs to be able to kind of do it all in a multitude of fashions and perform at a high level for this offense really to kind of succeed. Jamal says, I want to see some deep shots downfield when the opportunity comes up. Which wide receiver is that guy? Curtis Samuel. And this is an answer everybody's probably going to hate. And MVS. MVS is the deep threat on this roster. And I think, again, if you can get the right mismatch, I think Kincaid can be a deep shot downfield kind of guy, relatively speaking, depending on how deep you're looking. But if it's purely receiver, for me, it's Curtis Samuel and it's MVS. And that's kind of where we're at that spot. And I know Curtis Samuel's fast, but he's not a pure burner. Like, he's not just a vertical downfield type of dude. That's not really his game, even though he does have a good timed speed from a 40 perspective. Lauren, A+ as always. Lauren says, D. Alton Kincaid. Well done. She took the Dalton and added an extra L. Well done. Also goes back to Bean's love. This also fits in with Bean's love of like double letters and stuff, kind of going back to the 2-hill aspect. So well done. Basically do it all. It's in Kincaid. I like it. That's very good. That's very good. Yeah. So again, I think a lot of this wide receiver room depends schematically on what Joe Brady can do. On paper, as it stands, I think it's more of like a group that belongs on a wild card team than it does even necessarily a division winner or a conference winner or a Super Bowl type of threat. Excellent comment here from Josh. Yes, I mention this all the time that I forget about kind of saying it because it's a given for me. Josh says Kincaid's improvement in blocking will be the key to having a true mismatch offense. That's it for the wide receivers and the tight ends. So much of So much of this offense is going to be dependent upon that mismatch creation for the combination of size, frame, and athleticism you have with Matt Collins, Keon Coleman, Dalton Kincaid, Dawson Knox, honestly, even Curtis Samuel, who's a good blocker for his position. Shakir came on as a blocker. But with Coleman and specifically with Matt Collins and Kincaid and Knox, their value as a versatile dual threat tight end, the dual has to be there. So you have to be able to function as a blocker and as a pass catcher in order to win. And if someone wants to say, well, Travis Kelce's not really a great blocker, fair. He does give effort, or especially did early on, but then his pass catching dials are turned up to 10 in every way, shape, and form that it doesn't matter if he can't block at this point or doesn't even want to at this point. He's so good at reading coverage and understanding a defense's rules and knowing how to exploit them and attack them that he's kind of in his own tier. But yes, exactly your point, Josh. Well said. Like Kincaid's improvement in blocking will be, I don't know if it's the key, but it'll be a significant key to having a true mismatch offense because, again, it's that idea of Kincaid's in the game. If he can block a nickel corner, a safety, a linebacker, if he can wash down an edge and do all the pass catching, receiving stuff, that's a huge weapon because now he's factoring into the run and the pass. He's factoring into the personnel decisions the defense is making, and then you're leaning into a whole different grouping of mismatch creation. So very well said. Got another super chat. Thank you very much for being here, Richie, and thank you very much for the super chat. I appreciate it. Richie says Kincaid will, and will is in all caps, have a breakout year. He's our Kelce. I second this notion to a decent degree. I think at the end of the year, the conversation from a national perspective will be Dalton Kincaid has kind of taken that step into the upper echelon of tight ends, into the upper echelon of weapons and kind of mismatch creators. Again, I think he'll be the number one passing option in this offense in terms of target share, in terms of probably raw stats, maybe even advanced metrics. Everything is going to really funnel through him from a success standpoint. It's going to matter a lot for this offense. Adam's comment here saying, welcome to the Sean McVay Bills. Hey, I did an episode earlier this offseason, do an entire film breakdown episode of Disguise coverage where I spoke about specific offenses the Bills can and should borrow from. And Sean McVay and the Rams last year was one of them. It was the McVay Rams, Ben Johnson's Lions, and then what did I just say? Yeah, sorry. Sean McVay's Rams, Ben Johnson's Lions, and then Bobby Slowick's Houston Texans. And a lot of it stemming from condensed formations they use, reduced formational width, marrying the run and the pass, and then how they take advantage of their bigger bodied wide receivers and using that size, frame, athleticism combination. Yeah, very fair. Very fair. Sticking into this kind of weapons group, go to the tight ends. I don't think too much to write home here. Kincaid, Knox, know about it. I think this is a group that can win you a division. I like Dawson Knox a lot as a 2. I still don't have the utmost faith in him in catching passes when they matter most. He seems to just still have the dropsies, not from a volume standpoint like he used to, but just kind of in those high leverage or profile moments. But I really like Knox as a number 2 in terms of what he can be as a mismatch guy, athleticism, speed. He's gotten better each year as a blocker. Kincaid, I think, is sweet. I think you have a really good one, too. We've talked about Kincaid a bunch here already. Quentin Morris is the interesting one. So he made the roster here as tight end 3, which I hope means that he's going to be able to play through the shoulder injury that he has. I still wonder if Quentin Morris gets an IR designation at some point, and he made this initial 53, and there's going to be some gamesmanship when we go forward here with Quentin Morris. But I really like Quentin Morris as a tight end 3. I talked about him on the show last week. His ability to function as a pass catcher and as a blocker in the run game is super valuable for this team and as a tight end 3. Like, you can put him in and have him do some inline stuff, some offline stuff. Again, he could function in the pass game in a variety of ways. He's not the athlete with the upside that Kincaid has, and he's not a pure mauler as a blocker, but he's got a good all-around skill set, and he gives you special teams value as well. But he's good in the run game. He's good enough in the run game as a blocker, good enough in the pass game as a receiver and pass catcher. So I really like this tight end grouping. I think this is a group that you can win a division title with. And if Knox is a little more consistent in big moments, I think this is a good enough group to get you a conference championship as well. So I think the strength, again, of this offense right now kind of it all funnels up to Joe Brady maximizing everything schematically. So much of the success of this offense is going to be schematic dependent this year than it has been in years past. But I really do think the strength of this offense, going back to one of those comments earlier, is the combination of the offensive line, running backs, and tight end room, and then the wide receiver room by extension because of some of the sizes and body types and athletic combos merging and blending with the tight end grouping. But I really do think that the strength of this team lies in the offensive line, running back room, and tight end room, and kind of putting those pieces together. Tom says if the wide receiver group can just be average and survive the regular season without significant injuries, then that will be sufficient to get to the playoffs. I agree. Next position group, we talked about it a little bit already. Offensive line, the Bills kept. That's what I thought. The Bills kept 9 offensive linemen: Deion Dawkins, Spencer Brown, Connor McGovern, Osiris Torrance, David Edwards, and then Ryan Vandermark, Alec Anderson, Cedric Van Pran Granger, and Tylen Grable. Nice to see what Tylen Grable was able to do. I broke down some of this film against Carolina in the third game of the preseason. Really good snatch trap, starting to put some of the technical pieces together. I thought he looked rough against the Bears in week 1 in terms of pass protection, but he improved overall against Pittsburgh in the run and in terms of pass protection. And then I thought he improved further against Carolina. Just some of those Aaron Kromer teachings and staples, especially from his hand usage perspective, started to take hold with each passing game, which was nice to see. And then you're pairing that with the athleticism, which was nice. I thought he was pretty close to a roster lock, given that improvement and given his athleticism and the depth need at that spot. So good to see him make the roster. And the depth kind of improved, I thought, as the preseason went on. I thought Ryan Vandermark looked good at both tackle spots. I thought Alec Anderson looked good at center and guard, and he gives you guard, center, flex at every spot on the interior. And then Cedric Van Pran Granger, SVPG. I thought he improved each game. I thought he looked good really right from the jump. Granted, a lot of his reps this preseason were coming against the 3s and 4s, but he got some got some burn against the 1s against Carolina. Because, Will Clapp was out and then they put Anderson at guard and SVPG at center. But I thought he looked good from an athleticism standpoint, climbing to the second level, the intelligence, the support, the awareness. Really nice to see him kind of step up there. I thought La'el Collins would make this squad. I tweeted, I talked about it last week and then I tweeted it earlier this week. I didn't know if his lack of positional flexibility would hurt him in making this roster, and it did. He's pretty much guard only at this point in his career, but I thought he played a good enough guard that he would be the first guard up for me on this squad if something was to happen to Edwards or Torrance. But they cut him. They're rolling with 9 right now at this stage. And then also, just for notes, we talked about it earlier, Travis Clayton put on IR, and then Tommy Doyle is on IR as well. But I think that's a really solid group at offensive line. I think that's a group that you can win a division title with and compete for a conference championship with. Deion Dawkins, I don't think it's weird. Like, I don't think he gets the respect he deserves, but I also feel like he gets too much acclaim at times. But he's big, he's athletic, he's better technically than he gets credit for. I think he's a very, very, very solid left tackle. Edwards is better at guard than he gets credit for. We'll see what McGovern is at center, but I have faith. I'm very interested to see what year 2 of Osiris Torrance looks like. And then I'm interested to see what happens with Spencer Brown. I like the improvement he had last year. I think everyone did. He added more consistency to his game. We didn't see as much of those valleys when we saw the peaks and valleys like we had in previous years. I don't think he had as great of a year last year as people make it seem to be. He had a lot of help from having a tight end lined up next to him or having the running back chip out of the backfield being on his side. So he got help at times. More often than people recognize or acknowledge, but he still had a good year. He's extremely athletic. He's one of the best run blocking tackles, honestly, in the NFL because of the athleticism and the physicality that he has. He's a huge piece of why the Bills are able to lean into their tackle wrap stuff with Dart and the tackle trap and tackle pull game, because it's not just Dawkins, it's Spencer Brown as well. And they leaned into that because of the athleticism they have at both those spots. I think this is a combination between the starters and the backups that gives you some versatility, some depth, some youth, some experience. I like how this offensive line is shaped up. I was very worried about what they were week 1 against Chicago. They improved each game. A lot of that obviously goes to Aaron Kromer, who's one of the best offensive line coaches in the NFL. So big shout out to Mr. Aaron Kromer there. Nice one here from Cameron saying nationally underrated, but locally overrated with Dion. I like the way we put that there. Lauren says equipment team let out a deep breath when they learned Van Prank Granger made the team and they'd have to put all those letters on the jersey each week. Yeah. I bet they had a prayer circle going on of just being like, don't make the team, don't make the team. And then they saw it and they probably just all cried in the locker room knowing they're going to have to stitch that nameplate on and those letters week after week after week. But yeah, I'm kind of excited to see what he can become, what this whole line rounds into. Again, I think you have an offensive line similar to what you had last year that gives you versatility in the run game. You can run zone, you can run gap or man schemes. They give you enough in pass pro. Just a really good, well-rounded overall offensive line. I don't think they have a stud in the group right now. I don't think you're looking at the Bills' offensive line and saying they have, even just one all-pro candidate, although Deion Dawkins is a good player like we talked about. But I just think they're a steady group. I think everybody on the offensive line is like a B to an A minus or a B to a B plus, or you have a whole bunch of dudes at the end of the year who could all be B pluses. And I think that's tremendous. So I'm very happy with the offensive line grouping, and I like some of the depth that they got. Let's move to the defensive side of the ball. Before we do that, real quick, I want to show some love for the sponsor, One Pipe Pizza, the best pizza in Buffalo, New York. I say this every week. And I also say that every week as well. I don't say they're the best pizza in Buffalo because they sponsor the show. They sponsor the show because I think they're the best pizza in Buffalo. Sweet sauce pie, cup and char pepperoni, homemade blue cheese, great cheese to sauce ratio. They're really good people as well in terms of all the giving back they do in the community and the city of Buffalo, and their partnership with Roswell and trying to knock out cancer, Toys for Tots every holiday season, the SPCA, the Alzheimer's Foundation. They're good people making great food. So go get yourselves One Pipe Pizza. Online menu can be found in the episode show notes here on YouTube or whichever podcasting app or platform you are listening to this show on. Sal said, Ant, did you talk about Mike White? Yes, we led off with the quarterback spot. I don't remember how long ago. If you want, you can either rewind and go see it, or you can just finish this episode and then I'm going to timestamp it at the end and you can just go back and talk about that specifically. But long story short, I'm happy with it. I like it. It's a move that I kind of expected, not necessarily him, but someone in that realm. I like this from Andrew. Andrew says, Ant is the well-executed snatch trap of podcasting. I love that. That might be the best compliment I've ever gotten. Thank you very much for that. Let's move to the defensive side of the ball. We'll start with edge. Talked about it a little. I'm surprised that Casey Toohill made this roster, but the rest of the names at edge, I am not surprised at. This is a group that literally all five who made it, and I'm not patting myself on the back because I don't think it's anything revelatory. This is the group that I called that would make it. Greg Rousseau, AJ Epinesa, Von Miller, Duan Smoot, and Javon Solomon. Solomon was a really nice piece. Like this from Pops here saying, Solomon is the most improved player since the start of training camp. He's going to ball out. Yeah, I want to see him be able to continue to develop an inside move or inside moves, or be able to transition and read the set angle and the set line of offensive tackles, and being able to determine if he needs to continue to push to that outside, or if he needs to stop and kind of cut back inside and have an inside move, or even if he can just go more speed to power and go through dudes. We talked about it after the Chicago game. Solomon going with that patented move where he flashes that inside hand to get an offensive tackle to throw their hand so that he can dip and bend underneath and then rip and flatten to the QB. That move doesn't work as much in the NFL as it did in college because tackles are a different breed when it comes to length and strength and technique. So he needs to develop more just in terms of a secondary and third move when it comes to rushing off the edge. But I was impressed with his ability to play the run, the physicality, the tenacity. Isn't too surprising. One of the things I liked about him that I mentioned in watching his Troy tape earlier this offseason was that he plays like a velociraptor, just violence, intensity, tenacity off the edge and everything that he does. He needs, again, to develop more moves to his move set coming off the edge as a pass rusher, but not surprised to see Solomon make this team. Not surprised to see any of them. We'll see who functions as edge 2 or edge 3 when it comes to Von Miller and AJ Epinesa. We'll see how much of a closer role Von Miller has. Smoot, I thought, was a bit underwhelming this preseason as a run defender, setting the edge, as a spiker on two-man games. The Bills were bad just in general with two-man games this preseason. It was clunky. It was not precise. I don't really remember any of them working. It was kind of underwhelming, but I like this grouping. We'll see what happens with Casey Toohill, if he's actually going to make the squad or if he's the first man out as part of some planned move tomorrow or going forward. But overall, I think the grouping is fine. In terms of how good they are and what they can be, It's really going to depend on who takes a jump. I think right now this is a grouping at edge that is good enough to win you a division title. I don't think it's a grouping good enough to win you a conference championship or get you to a Super Bowl, unless somebody makes a jump. If Von Miller is closer to the old Von Miller than he is further away, that changes. If AJ Epinesa can take the efficiency numbers that he had last year and have that same level of production with more volume, it changes this grouping. If Greg Rousseau can take a jump as a pass rusher and be more of that guy we saw against Pittsburgh, it changes the notion of this grouping. Or if Smoot can be more of an edge 3 or edge 2, or if Javon Solomon is this nasty, rookie who can pile up double-digit sacks or a good amount of pressure, something like that. You need a needle mover, somebody who can show you something that they have not shown right now. I think Groot is the best chance. A lot of that has been tied to his health. He's just getting, banged up on his wheels the last couple of years, ankle and foot stuff the past couple of years. But if he can be more of that Pittsburgh Groot that we saw in week 2 of this preseason, it changes the notion of this grouping. I like the depth that the Bills have at edge and the combination of skill sets that they have there. I worry about the top end pass rush production at the edge grouping. So if somebody can answer that call, it could be Groot taking a jump. It could be AJ Epinesa. It could be Von Miller. It could be anyone. But I think someone needs to answer that call in order to make me feel like this group is good enough to win a conference championship. I think they're good enough to win a division. I don't think they're good enough to win a conference championship as of right now. Let me go. I saw some comments. Joe said, "Ant, I need you to know that I used the term cheese to sauce ratio to my girlfriend last weekend without realizing it while eating a good slice. It is now a go-to term." I love that, Joe. Thank you so much for telling me that. And it's a fact. Like, some pizza is too saucy, or the cheese is like falling off because it's not attached well enough to the dough based on how long they cook the pizza and then how much sauce they put on there, what kind of sauce they put it on. Like, every bite is just even with one pie pizza. It's cheese, it's sauce, it's the dough or the bread, and then pepperoni, blue cheese. Like, everything is just even. It's fantastic. Also, a thing that they do that I love, depending on like the toppings you get, like say you want mushrooms and peppers and onions, they chop them all up little by little and then just sprinkle them evenly across the whole pie. So it's not just like whole chunks where you're getting one bite that had a ton of toppings in it and then the next 4 bites doesn't have anything. I truly think they are tremendous. Lauren says, "Never tried one pie, but damn, do I love a company to support such good causes like what Ant just listed." Yeah, it's part of what attracted me to them. I love the initiatives that they do. I love plugging them every year here on the show. It's just a really cool thing that they do, and it's genuine. It's not, for attention or for notoriety or trying to increase sales. They do it just to do it because they do a lot of giving back, which is awesome. So big fan of what they do there. Time says, "I'll sign up for cover 1-1 pass if you can explain how Hill makes any sense." All right. So he's a high motor guy, good energy, who plays the run. That's it. I think what makes the most sense is he might be the first man out if they make another roster move, or they're looking at Javon Solomon to be more of a special teams kind of guy, pass rusher hunter, then they are trying to use him to work in against the run. Because here's the thing too, and this is a less than ideal timeline that people don't want to talk about, kind of like a dark timeline. But if AJ Epinesa was kind of like a flash in the pan last year, and if Von Miller isn't closer to prime, or isn't closer to the Von Miller of a couple years ago, you have questions at edge 2 and edge 3. You also have Dawuane Smoot, who's about to be 2 years, not even full 2 years removed from an Achilles tear. And then you have Javon Solomon, who's a rookie. I understand the notion. If Casey Toohill is actually on this squad, I somewhat understand the notion of it because he gives you a high floor against the run, and there is value in that. The pass rush upside is almost non-existent, but he's a known quantity against the run and can kind of stabilize things based on some of the dark timeline options that everybody ahead of him. I don't think that's going to make you feel better, but I think that's the plan there, right? He just high motor, energy guy, sets the edge against the run, allows your dudes behind him to hunt and other guys to make plays, right? Like, he's going to do his job. It's not a sexy job. It's not a high ceiling or a high upside job, but that's it. So it's either that for me, it's an insurance option and a known quantity because they think there's questions above him, or he's going to get cut or released tomorrow or in the coming days as they bring in somebody else or make some other moves because there's some more gamesmanship kind of coming. We'll see. Bum, ba, bum, ba, ba. Lauren, it says, at time, I cracked the Two Hill case earlier. B loves players with double letter names, and Two Hill is a double. It's the only explanation. Two O's and two L's. And, two of those double letters are vowels. So I think there's probably extra points if we're counting this right. If I'm doing this right, Lauren, I imagine it, that might be worth extra points. Let's see. Jamal says Dwayne Carter will make some plays this year. I hope he does. We're going to talk about defensive tackle next. Pop says, Ant, I almost bought dinosaur chicken nuggets on sale at BJ's just because you gave the props. That's right. We talked about dino chicken nuggets with Kendall a couple weeks ago. That's right. There's some things that just make you feel warm and fuzzy on the inside. This is what you need to be. Ooh, Nicholas says the Bills need to put in a claim for Cine, the safety just cut by the Vikings. Yeah, he's talking about Lewis Cine, safety from Georgia from a couple years ago. Tore his ACL in the preseason last year with Minnesota, suffered like a season-ending kind of gruesome-ish injury last year, or maybe in his rookie year a couple years ago. It's kind of faded by the wayside. I noticed that he got cut today. I don't know if he plays like Georgia, Lewis Cine, like I'm 100% down for it. I just don't think he's going to be that guy, and I don't know how he kind of fits into the room, but I thought something very similar. I haven't watched him play with Minnesota this preseason, so I can't speak to who he is now, but if he's the Georgia version that he was in college, I'd take it. Frank says, I come in as Ant, and Ant is talking onions on the pie. Yeah, we're talking pizza. You're going to get great pizza analysis and football analysis on this show. That is who I am. And a fantastic Christmas tree that gets changed month in and month out based on whatever holiday is in that month. Yes. But so to kind of wrap it up on the edge grouping, I think it's, as they stand right now, I think it's a grouping good enough to win a division title. I don't think it's a grouping good enough to get you to a Super Bowl, but that can change if somebody takes a jump. It could be Groot, it could be Vaughn, it could be Epinesa, it could be Solomon, it could be Smoot, it could be somebody. Like it just has, somebody needs to influence the needle when it comes to the top end pass rush production or increase how good the depth is at this group. It's got to be something. Move on to the next position grouping. Defensive tackle, pretty cut and dry here. Only 4. Ed Oliver, Daquan Jones, Austin Johnson, Dwayne Carter. I don't think any of this was really too surprising for anyone. I thought this was, nice pull from Cameron saying that Cine was a top 30 visit when he came out from Georgia. Nice pull. I did not know and or remember that. Well done, Cameron. I like that. Yeah, pretty cut and dry with the defensive tackle grouping. I thought Austin Johnson played well. I thought it was interesting that it looked like he slimmed down this year and they had him playing some 3 tech. I thought it was interesting that Dwayne Carter was playing some 1 tech. Pops here saying Oliver and Jones together are a wrecking crew. I think this group is really strong with the starters. I know Ed Oliver kind of doesn't show up in big games in the playoffs based on what happened against Cincinnati 2 years ago and then Kansas City last year. I don't think the Cincinnati one was on him as much as the Kansas City one was, where he just got erased by Tooney for pretty much the entirety of the game. But I like Ed Oliver a lot. I like Daquan Jones a lot. I think that's such a really good, strong combo at defensive tackle as your starters. I think Austin Johnson is fine as a 3 or as a 4. I do have questions about Dwayne Carter. Just what can he be against the run? My biggest thing with him in college was his inability, or his inconsistency, I should say, in taking on double teams. He would get blown off the ball when it came to doubles, even sometimes just against the run, versus base blocks, he would kind of get, sealed and turned, but really against double teams, that worries me a bit. Showed some improvement a little bit this year. We watched him drop the knee a couple times in the preseason. I think he's another high effort guy, just a little more skill. He will work across a lineman's face to not get reached and be able to stay in his gap. Didn't show a lot of pass rush pop this preseason, which worried me a little bit. I also thought he looked bigger with the Bills than he did at Duke, and kind of the opposite of Austin Johnson. I feel like Austin Johnson slimmed down and cut down a little bit, and I think Dwayne Carter added more mass. And I don't know if that's affecting his burst and his juice and overall penetration ability, but I thought Carter did enough to lock down a top 4 spot, which you really want to see considering he was a day 2 pick this year when the Bills took him in the 3rd round. I don't love the preseason that Carter had, but I think it was fine. He's definitely one to watch because I do think the Bills need contributions from everyone on the defensive line, starters and depth alike. Again, I think this defensive line is very much going to be a grouping that wins because you have wave after wave of like B- to B+ guys or B to B+ type of dudes. and just kind of wear offensive linemen down by attrition, where you can just have dudes coming in the third and fourth quarter who are 100% and can go 100 miles an hour for every single snap they're on the field. And it's just wave after wave of dudes. So I think Carter is important. And I think Austin Johnson's important as well. I think this group is good enough to win you a division title. Similar to the defensive tackle or the edge grouping, I should say. I don't know right now if this group is good enough to win you a conference championship. I really love Daquan Jones. I really like Ed Oliver. I just have questions about the depth. I don't know how functional and productive the combination of Johnson and Carter will be, or what they will be individually. I think it's a good grouping. I think it's a good foursome inside, but that top end production, I just wonder, when you take out Oliver, when you take out Daquan Jones, how much of a drop off is there to Austin Johnson, to Carter? I have more faith in Johnson than I do Carter at this point in time, but we'll see. But again, that's why it kind of functions in. I think this is a grouping you can win a division title with. I don't think this is a grouping right now that you are winning a conference championship with. Let's go to the linebacker position. As we mentioned, Matt Milano put on the IR, but designated to return, which I guess is good news. If anybody was worried that he was going to be out for the entirety of the year, he's not. Like we talked about earlier, him and Darrington Evans both being placed on IR, both with a designated to return tag, means the Bills are counting on them to return and come to the roster, because you only get 8, and them designated both of them means they've already used up 2 of the 8 right now. So good news. That means Milano's coming back. Linebacker grouping: Terrell Bernard, Dorian Williams, Nicholas Moreau, Balin Spector, Edfon Ulofocio, and Joe Andreessen. Obviously highlighted by Buffalo Joe, a.k.a. Young Dreezy, who someone coined earlier in the episode. Really good to see him. Buffalo kid, went to Lancaster, ended up going to UB for a year. Kind of just gets a tryout opportunity basically for the Bills, where they do the local college day thing. Is the last dude they sign as a UDFA. Makes the squad. Really cool story. Good for him. I think he offers legitimate special teams value because of his speed, his burst, and his ability to kind of shed blocks in space and make plays in space. I think he needs work in coverage in terms of play recognition and in terms of processing route distributions, especially against play action. But I'm not surprised that he made the roster. I kind of figured he would once Deion Jones got cut last night and they announced that. So good for Joe Andreessen. This grouping, I think, is really interesting. I really like the combination of Terrell Bernard and Matt Milano. I don't love any other combination. If I had to start 2 linebackers right now with Matt Milano being out, if everybody's healthy, I'm starting Moreau and Bernard. I want to say Dorian Williams. I really, 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 really do. But I just still think there's gaps in the processing and play recognition. The athleticism is there. The length is there. The juice is there. The impact at the tackle point is there. He's not a bad blitzer. I think he improved versus the run, but I still think there's just gaps in coverage that worry me a little bit. Overall, just even in spot drop stuff, let alone the match coverage stuff that we're going to see in the rules-based coverage stuff that we'll see once the regular season kicks off. But I'm okay if it's Dorian and Bernard. I still think I would prefer Moreau and Bernard, even though we haven't seen Nicholas Moreau play a snap in a Bills uniform yet, which I guess is really saying a lot for me potentially, or for Dorian Williams. I think with Milano being hurt, I think this is a grouping that can compete for a wild card spot. If it's Milano and Bernard, this grouping is good enough to win you a Super Bowl. Milano is a legitimate all-pro, and I think Terrell Bernard is on an upwards trajectory towards being a very, very, very good linebacker in the NFL. I do still think there are some warts for Bernard. You know, if he does not win with his processing and anticipation and he gets latched onto, he's getting chucked out of the club because he is a smaller type of linebacker, but he's good against coverage. He's good shooting gaps with his trigger and his processing. He's a good blitzer, high functional football IQ. Again, we talked about it earlier, him coming from Baylor and all their, you know, the NFL style defense they play. And then Dave Aranda's scheme at Baylor and how well that meshes with Sean McDermott's scheme with the Bills. He was a good fit for this team when they brought him in. I think, again, a combo of Bernard and Milano is an absolute tremendous combination. That's a Super Bowl winning linebacker grouping. With Milano being down, I see it as a grouping that's still good enough to win you a wild card spot. But even then, I think it's a little worrisome. I think I'm more down on Dorian Williams maybe than other people are. I see a lot of love for him in the space. And I don't know maybe I'm off base versus the consensus, but I am I have a little trepidation when it comes to this linebacker grouping without Milano. I think McDermott and Babbage can mitigate things a little bit, but I worry about how they fill that spot. And again, if I had to right now, if the Bills are opening up tomorrow and everybody's healthy at linebacker, aside from Milano, I am going with Nicholas Moreau, which is probably not a sexy answer for a lot of people in the chat. What else? Ulofoshio is going to get special teams work. Andreessen's going to get special teams work. Balin Spector is interesting. Him making the team, even though he's injured all the time. I guess the coaching staff still believes in him. I think he could be a potential candidate to, be cut, depending on what happens, if there's somebody they really want to go after and get. James saying who starts with Rap. We're going to talk about that when we get to the safeties. I like that. Sweep Sap. Yikes. I'm falling apart. Sweep Swap says, hey, Anthony, what do you think about getting Noah Brown and cutting MVS? I like it a lot. I love Noah Brown. I did a piece on him. Actually, you know what I want? I hate to plug it, but I dove into this a bunch at the beginning of the episode. So if you want, when it's done, go back, watch it at the beginning. I talked about it as one of my wants early in this episode. Or you can wait till the episode's done. I'll timestamp it and then put it through. But long story short, I really like Noah Brown. I would take him over MVS in a heartbeat right now. And I think he's more than just a wide receiver 5 for this team, based on what I think their schematic identity will be and what his skill set is and how all of those things fit together and coalesce into one. What else? All right, cool. Let's move on to the cornerback grouping. So mentioned it earlier, Daquan Hardy gets cut, which was a bit of a surprise, I think, to most Bills fans based off of the preseason that he had. The official corner room as it stands right now, outside corners first, Rasul Douglas, Christian Benford, Kyer Elam, Jamarcus Ingram, and then Brandon Codrington, who they traded for from the New York Jets today, but he's pretty much a returner only, punt return, kick return. I don't see him seeing any real cornerback snaps. And then, of course, you've got all-pro slot corner Taron Johnson there. So the overall corner room is Rasul Douglas, Benford, Kyer Elam, Jamarcus Ingram, Brandon Codrington, and Taron Johnson. I think this is a group that you can win a Super Bowl with. Taron Johnson's an all-pro. I think Christian Benford is an ascending player. I think he's still got an upwards trajectory. Rasul Douglas played like a legitimate CB1 last year when he came over from Green Bay. The starting grouping, I think, is strong at corner. Benford, Taron, and Rasul Douglas. I think they're all good against the run. They can function in man. They can function in zone. They can play match or rules-based coverages. They can get in press and legitimately jam you. They can play press bail. They can mirror. I'm excited for what that grouping is at the top end. I've been happy with what Kyer Elam has been in training camp and in the preseason, and Jamarcus Ingram as well. I think what's nice about Ingram, and I think this may potentially hurt Daquan Hardy, I think Daquan Hardy offered the Bills inside-outside versatility in terms of playing in the slot and then playing outside corner. Jamarcus Ingram also does that. And I think he does it with a little more physicality and a little more size than Hardy does. So how good Ingram has been outside this preseason was a good surprise for me. I wasn't expecting that level of technique in addition to the physicality. So I think his success and that inside-outside versatility that he provides also kind of hurt Daquan Hardy being there. But I still thought Hardy was going to make it. Again, like we talked about earlier, I think the push that came, when push came to shove, Sean McDermott said it. I forget when, but Daquan Hardy's spot on this team was going to be as a punt returner. And I think maybe some of his decision-making didn't make Sean McDermott feel warm and fuzzy. And even though his corner play was strong on the outside, and I don't think his return decisions were terrible. I think that was kind of, the straw that broke the camel's back a little bit when it came to him. And again, I think he was going to be corner 5 on the outside. You're going to sit there and you're going to look at, Douglas and Benford and Kyer and Ingram. Hardy was going to be behind Ingram, or at most, maybe he's pushing Ingram. So maybe he's corner 4. When it comes to the slot, I think Cam Lewis is the backup slot to Taron Johnson. So Hardy at best was going to be, nickel 3. But I think maybe Jamarcus Ingram is nickel 3, which is why that also contributed to Daquan Hardy potentially being cut. So again, I'm disappointed that Hardy got cut. I hope he makes the practice squad and comes back through and clears waivers. So we'll see with that. But overall, I think this is a good group. I think this is a group that can win you a Super Bowl with the starters. We'll see what they are from a depth perspective. We'll see corners always tend to get banged up. So at some point, Kyrie Elam is going to see real snaps. Jamarcus Ingram is going to see real snaps. So at a certain point, your depth is going to be tested. So I hope that depth is legitimate. I hope the consistency that we saw from Kyrie Elam and how he's kind of cleaned up his game this offseason in camp and in the preseason, I hope that continues if he sees regular season action. And I hope if Jamarcus Ingram sees regular season action. All right. I'm not trying. I normally don't care if other fans are in here, but if you're just going to be like super contentious, like I'm just goodbye. Have a good night, bro. We'll see what Jamarcus Ingram can be if he gets put into a game, right? The physicality, if it can still match with the technique, what do you see with the athleticism and the coverage aspect that he provides? And again, the inside-outside versatility. So I think that depth will be tested with Elam and with Ingram. We'll kind of see what they can be. Also, I apologize if you hear the blinds banging. I do have the windows open. And for those of you who don't know, I mentioned it earlier, my AC is not working in the office, so it's hot as hell. So I got the windows open like crazy. Also, from a chat perspective, I normally don't care if there's other fans and people go back and forth, but if someone's coming in here purely to troll and just bother everybody and talk ridiculous stuff, like I just don't want to see it keep popping up and being distracting for everyone. So that's why I booted that dude. Like he can go be a Chiefs fan. I don't care that he's a Chiefs fan. I didn't even see what he said. I just saw the contentious nature of it, and I'm not here for that right now, especially at 10:43 on a friggin' Tuesday. I'm not down for that. But again, good corner grouping. We'll see how the depth works out at outside corner. And because, again, I do think that's going to be tested at some point. Benford is going to get banged up. Douglas is going to get banged up. You're going to see Kyer and or Jamarcus Ingram see actual game reps this year, and we'll see how they function. Moving on to the last position. Jay Will says, what was the biggest surprise cut to you? It was Daquan Hardy. I thought he played good at outside corner. I thought he showed good zone recognition. I thought he recognized route distributions well and made plays on the ball. I think he was fine coming up against the run. He had a couple tackles that he missed, but I think overall was fine. And this is, I guess, kind of a knock on him based on his size, but I thought he played well despite his size. And if he was just a little taller, a little longer arms, I think he would have had a couple interceptions, even just from that Pittsburgh Steelers game. So again, the biggest surprise cut to me was Daquan Hardy still to this moment. And again, I hope he comes back on the practice squad. Josh says, and have you seen any footage on the new CB we got? I watched some of his special team stuff against Carolina. Just because that was his standout game. But no, I have not watched any actual corner stuff. From a couple people that I know and respect, his corner tape is not good. And I think the expectation for him is to be, he's a corner, but in name only, in depth chart jargon only, he's just a returner, punt return, kick return. I think he's going to be the punt returner and the kick returner. I thought Ty Johnson was going to be the kick returner and Hardy would be punt. Looks like Codrington's going to be both, but no, I haven't watched any tape on him yet play defense. I will either tonight or tomorrow and post some stuff if there's anything notable. Also, just in general of getting prepared for the Cover One film room tomorrow. Yeah, I also booted that guy, and then he came back and made another comment. So I feel like he has multiple. I feel like that Chiefs guy has multiple accounts, which is just straight up troll indication and a huge red flag in general. I bet he comes back at some point with another account or another name, which again can be fine. I don't know how much time you have on your hands to want to friggin' do that, but each their friggin' own. Safeties. Taylor Rapp, Mike Edwards, Cole Bishop, Cam Lewis, and DeMar Hamlin, Terrell Burgess, and D. Delaney were both placed on injured reserve. So the Bills keep 5 safeties. I am interested to see what happens here at safety in terms of who the running mate is with Taylor Rapp. I know that was a question earlier, maybe 10 minutes ago, right before we got into the secondary. I think Rapp is one of your guaranteed starters. If everyone's healthy, realistically, I think, let me back up. I think Mike Edwards starts week 1 with Taylor Rapp. I don't think Cole Bishop is going to be completely 100% and up to speed. And even if he is 100% from a health standpoint, I think him just being a rookie kind of hurts his case a little bit. I think Mike Edwards starts week 1. I think your 2 healthiest safeties of all the banged up safeties. And again, everybody's been. Edwards had the hamstring injury. DeMar has a hamstring. Cole Bishop had that shoulder, the rib piece, or whatever that kept him out for a while. If there's any questions in that group, I think it's funny from John. He says it's Bill Belichick. He's trolling us, and then swaps with it's Jerry's Tony's burner. That's funny. Um, if there's any doubt with the safeties in week one, I think the opening week group is Cam Lewis and Taylor Rapp. If there's still injury concerns with Edwards or Bishop or Hamlin, some combination, you're looking at an easy Cam Lewis and Taylor Rapp. But if I had to bet my money, I think the starter day one is Mike Edwards to go along with Taylor Rapp. If it's not Edwards, I think it's Cam Lewis. That is what I am betting on when it comes to day one, just because I don't think Bishop is going to be completely ready from a health or just rookie ready to see starting minutes aspect. And the way DeMar's hamstring was going, I don't see him necessarily being ready either. And I also think Mike Edwards is a better safety than DeMar Hamlin. So I think all things equal, if there is health there, I think Edwards and Rapp are your opening day starters against Arizona. If I had to bet money on a different pairing, it would be Cam Lewis and Taylor Rapp. And then overall with that grouping, not a lot of sexiness to it. I think a pairing of Edwards and Rapp is a good enough group to have you compete for a wild card. I don't think they're a safety grouping that is a vulnerability or, leaves you exposed on the back end, but I do think your ceiling in terms of coverage structure and upside is a little limited just based off of each of their skill sets and not necessarily having any safety that has true post-safety, single high safety range. I guess in theory, Cole Bishop would have it, but I don't know if he has the processing and the recognition to capitalize on that athleticism. I don't think DeMar is that guy. I don't think Rapp is that guy. Edwards is probably the best suited for it, given his overall combination of processing, play recognition, speed, and athleticism. Nobody's really an athletic marvel on that back end other than Cole Bishop. I think Rapp is a decent combo of physicality in terms of being a hammer and having some athleticism to his game. He's not a complete statue who's moving in concrete back there, but he's not really a rangy ball hawk type of safety. So I think this group is fine. I don't think they're not a deficiency, the safety room, but I don't think they're a strength of this defense or this team. And I don't think they're a group that helps you unlock more of your defense. Hyde and Poyer, honestly, Bills fans were spoiled with Hyde and Poyer for all those years, but I think each of them and then them in conjunction with one another were force multipliers in terms of helping the defense being able to unlock other players, other levels, and things from a schematic presentation standpoint and from a schematic execution standpoint. I don't think you have that anymore. I think Rapp is good enough to get the job done. I think Mike Edwards is good enough to get the job done. We'll see what Cole Bishop can be. I think he's probably the highest ceiling guy they have in that room. Not even probably. I think he is the highest ceiling guy that they have in that room. We'll see how he comes back from his injury and then how he just develops in general, injury aside. But I think right now, looking at that grouping, it's not a strength, but I don't think it's a complete deficiency or a hole or something that necessarily holds you back. Again, I don't think you can achieve the same level of upside that you had in years past. I think Babich and McDermott, similar to kind of the wide receiver room on offense, I think the Bills' safety grouping is to the defense like the wide receiver grouping is to the offense. It's a grouping that has some skill sets that you can work with, and they have some schematic potential that you can take advantage of, but it's going to be on the defensive coordinator or the coaching staff to maximize it with that safety grouping like it is on Joe Brady to maximize the wide receivers. And I trust Sean McDermott when it comes to safeties. I think part of what made Hyde and Poyer was Sean McDermott, the track record of what he did with safeties in Philly, what he did in Carolina, and again, what he did here in Buffalo, getting the most blood out of the safety stone year after year and raising floors and raising ceilings. I trust him to set their safeties up for success and mitigate their areas of opportunity by playing to their strengths as much as possible. But within that, I think that just limits some more of the coverage stuff you can do, right? You have to disguise more. How late can you truly spin? How comfortable do you feel playing cover one and cover three based on who you're going to have in the post? Who is that post safety? How predictable are you in it? Are teams able to key on, okay, like, if they are going to have a post safety, it's going to be Edwards or it's going to be Rapp. So we can kind of, I think in that, I mean, they used Rapp more deep last year than I thought they would in general. But if you're sitting there, and I'm making the hypothetical up, but if teams can key in on like, okay, if they go single high, it's going to be Mike Edwards. we really just have to key on Rap because Rap is going to be that buzz safety or the robber or the down safety. And we just have to watch for the spin, but we kind of know based on odds and probability, this is their tell, this is the key. It just limits some of what you can do. With Hyde and Poyer, you could do anything. You could run quarters, you could run cover 2, you could run cover 6, you could run cover 2 man, you could run cover 1, you could run cover 1 robber, you could run rat and hole, you could run cover 3 buzz sky, you could hold your pre-snap shell and then flip it on its head as soon as the snap happened. You could play games. They could disguise and just spin and rock and roll their safeties at a moment's notice because of how smart they were, but also because of how interchangeable their skill sets were. Even though Hyde leaned more towards a traditional free and Poyer leaned towards more of a traditional strong, they both were at the forefront of that movement of removing the strong and removing the free from safety positions, and they were both just safeties. So I don't think you have that anymore. I don't think anybody thinks you have that anymore. And it's not the worst thing in the world. It just means the safety grouping isn't a strength of this team like it used to be. And it means some of your schematic upside and capability is a bit limited. You don't have as much access to the menu without turning the page like you did previously with Hyde and Poyer. So you just have to change some things in terms of coverage ratios and how you get to it and the presentation that you have for it. But we'll see. And again, I don't think it's terrible. I think it's a grouping overall, no matter what the combination is. I think it's a grouping that's good enough to get you a wild card spot, especially if it's Edwards and Rapp. I do think, all things equal, the best starting safety grouping for 2024, if you're trying to win in 2024, is Mike Edwards and Taylor Rapp. And then if Edwards goes down, I would like Cole Bishop to be that guy just to see what he offers. But I don't dislike Cole Bishop. I just think he's better more in the box and less as a traditional safety. I think Cole Bishop is best used as a box safety, apex, nickel, in and around the sideline and hook curls and seams, kind of like that type of role. I think he's best as, a robber or as a buzz safety coming down. I think he's best in and around the line of scrimmage. I think he'd be great in like the Ravens defense or the Patriots defense. These defenses that are multiple, that use 3 safeties at a time, and he can blitz from the slot. He can be at the second level. He can go and cover in the flat. He can do a lot of match things from the underneath and the intermediate. But we'll see, again, how he kind of translates. Again, for me, I know I've said again like 5 times in the last 3 seconds, but I think the best option for winning in 2024 at safety is Mike Edwards and Taylor Rapp. If it's not Mike Edwards and Taylor Rapp, then I'm putting Cole Bishop in for either Rapp or Edwards. So safety 1 and 2 are Rapp and Edwards. Safety 3 for me is Cole Bishop. I don't mind Damar Hamlin. I think he's good coming from depth and functioning in and around the box. I think he's got good snap timing and being a force player in and around the line of scrimmage. I don't love him in coverage, and I don't love his athleticism or potentially kind of lack thereof. Lauren says, I worry that Kincaid was too much in their ear about Bishop. I hope I'm wrong and Bishop shows out, but I'm leery. I second that notion. I don't think he's a bad player. The Bills have their safeties are more traditional safeties. I think Cole Bishop would be good or more fun or best suited for, and I don't want to make this comparison because they're very different from a size and frame standpoint. I think Cole Bishop would be better in more like a Kyle Hamilton role where he's like the big nickel, or like what Jeremy Chin was at times as a rookie in his first couple years with Carolina, where sometimes he's a split safety deep, sometimes he's single high safety, but sometimes he's coming in as a linebacker, sometimes he's in the slot, and he's a true slot, matching or covering in man or covering the flat, or he's blitzing and doing all this stuff. I like him more as this monster man chess piece that you can move all around. And Hyde and Poyer weren't that. So I think you'd have to change the safety structure a little bit to get away with that. And then also, you got to tie in the running mate with him a little bit. Like if you're unlocking Cole Bishop, if it's Cole Bishop and Taylor Rapp, that means Rapp is playing more single high or more deep safety type stuff. And I don't think it necessarily coalesces into one too pretty. I don't know how the puzzle pieces fit great. Again, I don't think he's bad. I also don't think he plays as fast as the athletic testing numbers show, which is a whole nother issue for me. But yeah, I just question what his fit is given how they traditionally have used their safeties versus what I project his best fit to be. Doesn't mean he's bad. Doesn't mean it's not going to work out. And again, Sean McDermott has a great track record with safeties. So part of me feeling better is knowing Sean McDermott's track record with safeties. But Yeah, I do. I do have some trepidation with the pick. I didn't love him completely from an individual evaluation standpoint, and I didn't love his fit necessarily with the Bills just based on what he excels at, where he excels, and what they've done in the past. But we'll see. We'll see. We'll see. We'll see. What is another question for me here? Josh says, Ant, your percentage chance that Micah decides to come back. Oh, right now I'm going to say like 20, just based off of like some of the things he said, but I really feel like he's cool, just kind of retiring and chilling, but I won't completely rule it out. So I'm gonna say 20% chance right now. James had a similar question as well, saying, do we see Hyde at some point? He might be it at some time this season. He might be, who knows? Maybe the safety room falls apart with injuries or play, and they call Micah Hyde, and he comes in and works out and is on the roster for several weeks, and then finally suits up again. We'll see. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what kind of happens at safety a little bit. Last piece here, special teams. Tyler Bass as your kicker, Sam Martin as your punter, Reed Ferguson as your long snapper. Not too much to get into here other than I don't feel completely confident in Tyler Bass, which sucks. I hope he gets some low leverage opportunities to kick come regular season, and that helps him get rid of the yips and build his confidence back up. But as of right now, I don't have a ton of confidence in him. I don't think he has a ton of confidence in himself. So we'll kind of see what Tyler Bass is going forward. But I do think it's fair to be a bit worried about him or be worried about the kicker position. As far as bringing in competition for him to beat him out, I just don't know if you're going to bring in somebody who's better than him right now or who's going to be more consistent than him. And then tying it into what he's got going on, if he's already having confidence issues and you bring in other kickers to try out and they're not as good as him and you stick with Tyler Bass, that's fine. But then you also probably knock his confidence down a bit more because you just showed your hand that you wanted to bring another kicker. So I think it's a muddy and annoying situation to have. I'm hoping things kind of work out. Again, give him some first 2, 3, 4 games. Give him, if the opportunity presents itself, give him a bunch of 30-yard kicks or 40 and under, kind of build him back up little by little. So if you need to lean on him for 50-yarders and 55 plus, he's got some of his swagger back a little bit, but I think it's fair to be worried about that spot. Sam Martin, I'm in a similar kind of boat. I just want him to reduce the inconsistency. I love when he kicks like 55-yard bombs, which is sweet. I hate that he also kind of pairs that with like 15 to 20-yard shanks. I'd rather him just consistently give me a 40 to 44-yard punt every time with good hang time, and I'll take that. Give me, reduce the roller coaster, reduce the variance. Even though some of the variance is sweet and on the high end, just be steady Eddie when it comes to the punt game. So we'll kind of see what happens there. Going back to some of the comments here. Joe saying, could it be that the use of Poyer as a dime backer last season inspired them to take someone who could excel in that role and be a security blanket on the off chance Milano got hurt or the backup struggle? That's a fair thought. I'm just not doing that with a second round pick. Like if that's the thought for Cole Bishop, cool, that's sweet. It's still a sub package role. Granted, it's a sub package role that is important in today's NFL, but taking a dude in the second round to just fill a sub package niche or function on the off chance of something, I don't think that's the best allocation of resources given where this roster is. So I don't think it's a horrible idea or even a horrible thought. I just don't love the resource allocation of it, given that he was a second round pick. If you're doing that with a guy in the 4th round or 5th round, or even in the 3rd, depending on where you are or where your team is, I think it's a different conversation to be had. And also too, overall, I think they do see him as kind of like a traditional answer at the safety spot, which they need. I mean, Edwards is on a 1-year deal. Rapp is on a 3, but you really, if you wanted to, you could cut Taylor Rapp right now and the financial repercussions are not significant. And then he has an even easier out next year when it comes to dead cap. So there's no real longevity at the safety spot for anybody on the roster currently other than Cole Bishop. So I think they drafted him with the intent of him being an answer at one of the safety spots going forward. Obviously at one, he can't be the answer at both. I just don't know how much they intend on playing him this year or how they intend on using him based on where I think his skill set leans, how he was used at Utah, and how the Bills safeties have been used traditionally. Or again, it could be another schematic type of change. You know, the way Terrell Bernard played linebacker last year, the way they used him, it was a different type of linebacker role that they used Tremaine Edmonds for. They did not play Bernard at linebacker the way they played Tremaine Edmonds, because they're different players with different skill sets. So maybe we'll get some of that with the safety spot as well, and we'll get some less traditional safety stuff, or just more chaos back there in terms of disguising and spins and rotations and what they do with everything. And then Joe followed up saying, plus the hopeful development of him as safety of the scheme. Sure, it could happen. It could happen. It could happen. Lauren says, do you think Brady will be scheming more than usual to not have to go for field goals this year with a lesser confidence in Bass? Do coordinators voice their concerns about other groupings openly? I feel like they voice their concerns probably in the coaches' meetings. I think that's something that's probably established going into a week. You know, the coordinators are getting together, and with McDermott, that coaching staff's getting together. And if Smiley's saying like, hey, this is where Bass is at from a mental standpoint, from an execution standpoint. So you're preparing in week for that. And I also think you're probably in game. Like they also check with the kickers too. Like McDermott will check with the kickers, or not necessarily McDermott, but like coaches will check with the kicker to be like, hey, where are you good from today? Like, okay, you're good from 50 and below or 60 and below. Here's how you feel. All right, cool. They're checking with the coordinator, knowing like, hey, how's he feeling today? Is he good? What do you think our odds are of doing this or that? And then that is going to go into the conversation. I think that's a really good question and a really good point, Lauren. I think you could see more like fourth down attempts this year from the Bills, or more, it's 3rd and 7 instead of just straight up trying to get, it's 3rd and 7 from the 40 instead of trying to just straight up get 8 yards or more and get the first down. Maybe doing something to make it 4th and 3 or 4th and 2, because you're going to go for it on 4th down because you're not holistically confident in Tyler Bass. I think that's a really interesting thing to track. 1 and 2, just overall good question. And yeah, coordinators are going to get together. They're going to know and understand who's got a good feel. Same thing with not even just coordinators, position coaches know that, like who's got a good feel this week at these positions. Everybody is kind of funneling that information together to build out the lineups, the situational packaging, and then that all coming together on game day with real-time updates as the games progress in terms of knowing everyone's status and how everyone can best be used and best deployed. Really good question. I like that a lot. Man, I did not expect to go. I should have known because it's a roster countdown day. Went for over 2 hours in this episode. It's after 11 o'clock on a Tuesday night. I'm going to throw up the bandits as toodles, folks, because we're going to start to wind down. Before anybody leaves, if you're joining me live, if you have not already, please, 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 and thank you, drop a like on this video. I know it's corny to ask for likes, and I know it's corny to say that it's corny to ask for likes, but likes are legitimately the lifeblood of these streams, and they're tremendously helpful for myself and the entire team here at Cover One. So if you have not already, please, 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 and thank you, drop a like on this video. It goes a sincerely long way towards helping myself and the entire team to track and trend in front of more eyes and ears. So if you're on YouTube watching live now, before you leave for the night and tuck yourself in for bed and have some ice cream or some milk and cookies or whatever you do as your nighttime routine, please drop a like on this video here on YouTube. Please, 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 and thank you. If you are not watching live and you are watching post live on YouTube, that's cool too. Please drop a like on this video. If you are listening on one of the podcasting apps or platforms, that's cool too. Please rate and review and subscribe to Disguise Coverage on whatever podcasting app or platform you're listening to this show on. If you're here on YouTube, turn on notifications for the Disguise Coverage playlist. Subscribe to Cover One, the channel as a whole. Thank you very much to everybody who joined me live in this episode. The attendance was great tonight in terms of the live viewers, the engagement with the chat, the back and forth, everybody. It was just a really fun conversation. I was happy to dive into a lot of the stuff, but the questions that you folks had for me, the back and forth with each other, just all the football conversation I thought was really cool and enjoyable tonight, as it usually is here on the show. So thank you very much, folks, for providing that. Thank you very much to Lauren for your super chat and for just crushing it all episode. It's really cool to see you here in the comments and in the chat, especially now that you're not really active on Twitter anymore. So I appreciate you being here, and thank you for making me laugh and for the super chat. Thank you to Josh for your awesome comments and contributions throughout the show. Thank you to Mark C for your super chat. Thank you to Just the Tippy Canoe, your boy Lettuce, and Richie Fresh for your super chats. Appreciate all you folks being here in general. And then again, just the super chats. It's really awesome to see. Thank you very much to everybody who tuned in live and riding with me, whether it was for 1 minute, 10 minutes, or for the entirety of this show for over 2 hours. And again, whether you watched live, watched later, listened later, whatever you got, thank you very much for your view, your listen, your download, whatever form or fashion your support comes in. I am tremendously thankful for it and greatly appreciative of it. Tell your family and friends and loved ones about how awesome this show is and make them watch it. If you did not think this show was awesome and you thought it was terrible, tell your enemies about the show and try and ruin their day by making them watch it. Appreciate the kind words coming in for myself. Oh, no worries, Claude. Claude said, thanks and good night. Sorry for bringing the troll in. I didn't think you brought the troll in. I think they came on their own accord. Again, trolls do what they're going to do. And if they're super terrible, sometimes people engage. You weren't the only one either. And I don't think you did anything wrong whatsoever. I just didn't want it to become a distracting point for the chat and for the people versus I thought we had a lot of good banter and engagement back and forth on the show with the chat, with myself, with all you folks in the chat, with each other. I just didn't want that to go haywire. So don't worry about it. You didn't do anything wrong. And I appreciate you being here. And I appreciate you apologizing, even though you don't have to apologize for anything. Thank you for being here. I think that'll do it for us here on this episode. I hope you and your family and friends and loved ones are all doing well and staying safe. Be kind to one another. Take care of one another. I will see you next Tuesday for an in-season, regular season edition of Disguise Coverage, where we will be diving into the top matchups that will matter most for Bills versus Cardinals. I have one of my favorite guests joining me for that episode and kicking off the season, so I'm very excited for that. So join me live here on YouTube next Tuesday, 9 p.m. Eastern, for that matchup detail breakdown specific episode of Disguise Coverage. Tune into the Cover One Film Room live tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern with myself and Eric Turner, or watch it on replay after. Enjoy the rest of your Tuesday night. Godspeed, and as always,